guys, good morning. How's everybody today? I'm ready to tackle another morning of StreamYard and Court TV not behaving themselves. I was going to fiddle around with OBS and change my mind. I decided to just stay in bed and watch YouTube and diamond paint and just enjoy my afternoon. So I did nothing but follow Spike around with a camera in the yard. Actually, my phone, but in the yard, trying to get him to look right at the camera, and I couldn't get him to do it. So if you want to watch video of Spike not looking at the camera, I did a short yesterday, and it's for members only. So if you want to see my cute little chunky monkey, go check that out. I'm doing much better today. Mornings, I used to not be a morning person. Mornings have been much better. I literally cannot wait to get up anymore in the morning because I like to get up and I go to Court Vibes and I watch the OJ trial, and then I come here and watch the Phil Spector trial with my friends. So yeah, mornings are good. I like mornings better than evenings now, that was never my norm. I've always been a night person. But lately I've been sleeping in, and so I had to set my alarm clock this morning, and then I snoozed, and then I reset it for later. So, I've been very tired lately, and I don't know why. So I ordered I ordered some Herbalife energy tea and some collagen. So I'm gonna make me some healthy energy tea to hopefully help with the tiredness. So, and I need to make an appointment with my oncologist to do blood work, but I'm putting that off too. I have an appointment with my pain management doctor today. So that's an update on me. How are you guys? Are you guys okay? I hope you guys are doing good. Mean Kitty was here a minute ago, but she's gone into hiding. Okay, so we were not done with Dr. Pina has, I thought it was 5. It's not. It's like 8 or 9 videos of testimony. We had about 20 minutes left on, I think it was part 3. I've got them all pulled up and ready to go. Let's just hope StreamYard can deal with it. And we're going to finish. We had about 20 minutes left on part 3 when I just couldn't deal with StreamYard anymore. So, let's see. I am on V12 because my V12 was low, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference. And I've had an iron infusion, and it did not seem to help either. So I'm due to go back for blood work. But I canceled my last appointment because I wasn't feeling well, and it's a 45-minute drive. They won't let me get my labs drawn over here closer to where I live. They want me to go into their office to get labs drawn. So I called and canceled because I wasn't feeling well. And we were in the middle of a trial or something, so they called me to reschedule, and I didn't answer the phone because when I'm streaming, my phone's on silent, and I didn't hear the call. And what trial was it? It was one that was in a different time zone from me, so it was like, it was, I don't remember what trial it was, but it went to like 6 at night because it was in a different time zone. So I couldn't call them back while that trial was going on because I was busy. And I was going to call them when the trial was over But then I got a letter in the mail saying that they had canceled all my future appointments because I didn't call them back. I was so mad. And so I just I've been putting it off. So I need to call them back and say, look, I have obligations and I cannot just call you back. I mean, I'm in remission. I don't have cancer right now. I'm just tired. Oh, okay. Maybe that's what it was. Okay, I'll try the complex because complex has the B12 in it, right? Yeah, B12 complex. Okay, I'll try that. Hey, Jelly Bean. Okay. Let's see what StreamYard is going to do to me today. I should probably go ahead and turn my camera off. Okay, it's starting already. Turn the camera off. Thank you.
Well, we haven't collected any. It's just personal observations, and we have yearly statistics, but we don't break it down. But just by observing and talking to other colleagues that I work with, it breaks down interesting enough, so I can learn.
Okay, and you mentioned that your office hasn't published anything on it. When you do a publication, do you have to sort of document the reliability of the data before you can publish it?
Absolutely.
In other words, that the data really shows what you're proposing it shows?
Yes.
And which means it has to be scientifically reliable, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, have you ever published anything in this particular area?
Not in this area, no.
Okay, have you published anything in any area of forensic pathology relating to gunshot wound deaths?
Not to gunshot wounds, no.
How about anything related to self-inflicted wounds, whether they be suicidal, intentional, or self-inflicted, accidental, or any of the other categories?
No publications to that.
Okay, so that's not an area that you've concentrated on as far as your profession. Is that true?
That's correct.
What areas have you published on that you have taken a particular interest in as an expert in the field of forensic pathology?
I like the heart. It's always been one of my favorite areas. And I have a recent publication in cardiovascular pathology on an unusual case of a young gentleman. I won't go into details, of course, but that just gives you an idea what I work on. I also give lectures up at the USC Medical Center, the cardiology department, on forensic pathology, but that's teaching to help them become better cardiologists. So that's some of my functions.
Okay. Now, with reference to your work as a forensic pathologist, I want to kind of move to another subject area, Dr. Pena, and I want to talk about what comes out of the body when a person is shot. Would one fluid that comes out or material that comes out be blood?
Yes.
Okay, and does it have a name? Do you refer to that as something in the field of forensic pathology and medicine when you're dealing with it as an evidentiary item in coming to the conclusions that you do in this type of work?
I've heard different terms like blood spatter or blowback. When it comes back onto the shooter's hand or onto the shooter or whoever is nearby. I believe those are the terms that have been used.
Okay, so blowback, blood spatter, those are the two terms that you're familiar with, is that correct?
Yes.
And have there been studies in that subject area similar to the studies that deal with where people tend to shoot themselves?
Yes.
And is Dr. DeMeo, is he another one that studies that also, since he deals with guns?
I'm sorry. Yes, he does. He references in his book a gentleman, Betz, B-E-T-Z, these are German, I believe, pathologists. And that paper, I think, is in early 90s or something. I can't remember. But they wrote a paper on that, and he refers to it in his book.
Okay, so he helps educate pathologists like you on this subject area. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and you rely upon his books and his publications to come to the opinions that you're giving in this particular case. Is that true?
Yes, and one other thing just to point out, while doing that, I've done it in the past because I like research, is I'll go and look at the references that are given in the book on some of them and just check the validity to make sure that they're not being misinterpreted. So I do that sometimes and to help myself learn.
How did Dr. DeMaio do as far as the references? They weren't they were legitimate as far as?
Oh, they're good, yeah.
I'm sure he appreciates that.
Where is he?
He's right in here.
Oh.
I mean, there he is. Anyway, Dr. Pena, you would consider the books that he's written and the references that he referred to as being authoritative on the issue of gunshot wounds as it relates to blood spatter. Is that true, Dr. Pena?
Yes.
And how long, ever since you were a forensic pathologist, when you were not experienced having done 3,300 cases, but you've only done a couple of cases, he was the authority at that time when you were a new person doing this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so he's been in the field for many years, many decades. Is that correct?
Yes.
Recognized by all of the 400 forensic pathologists in the United States as well as in the world. Is that correct?
That's correct.
His book is published in many different languages throughout the world. Is that also correct?
Objection, this calls for speculation.
Sustained.
So we've talked about blood spatter, and you also use the term blowback, and there's a difference between those two terms. Is that correct, Dr. Pena?
Yeah, don't ask me because I don't know the difference. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, if somebody gets shot and the bullet goes through, there might be blood spatter that gets created. Is that correct?
Yes.
Foundation.
Are you able to testify to that based upon your expertise?
No, I can't.
The objection sustained, the answer is
Okay.
taken.
When the word blowback implies something coming back as opposed to going forward, is that true?
Objection, foundation.
Again, are you able to answer this based upon your personal knowledge and expertise?
No.
All right, the objection sustained.
Is there a difference? Well, who is the person that you rely upon, if any, other than the publications and the documents that you referred to as far as the references that you rely upon to interpret issues of blood spatter? Let's talk about that subject area first.
Objection, assumes facts not evidence.
Sustained to the way the question is phrased. You may rephrase it.
In this particular case, Dr. Pena, did you consult with anybody or talk to anybody relating to the issue of cause and manner of death as to the issue of blood spatter?
No.
Okay, so you didn't, for example, talk to Dr. Lynn Harold at the Sheriff's Laboratory and ask questions about that, or did she give you any information about that?
No.
Okay. In your note, well, let me ask you, when you were at the scene, did you make any notes regarding blood spatter on the body of Lana Clarkson?
Not at that time, no.
Did you make notes about what you saw at the scene at a later time that weren't in your notes, these notes that are set forth in Exhibit II? Because there's nothing in there regarding blood spatter, is that correct?
That's correct.
On that date, once you left the scene, it was your idea that there was no blood spatter on Lana Clarkson's hands. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and later you learned that that was incorrect. Is that correct?
It depends how you describe the blood spatter, because there could be like mist-like stains versus big droplets, which is what my eye is looking for, over the fingers and over the top part of the hand. What I found out later, there's mist-like stains only on the wrists and a little part of the back of the hand, which is a big difference in my view. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but that's what I learned later.
Okay. In any event, you looked at her hands and you evaluated her hands very carefully. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And the reason you did it for a lot of reasons, but one reason you did it because you wanted to see if she had, like, let's say, some tissue or blood under her fingernails that might indicate she was in a struggle. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you looked at all the ends of her fingers to see if you saw anything that might be out of the ordinary that would give you some information regarding her being in a struggle. Is that true?
Yes.
What did you look for? If you could tell the jury, what were you looking for that might have assisted you in explaining that she was in a struggle prior to her demise?
Because she had on a black jacket, long sleeve, it was hard at that time to assess the bruising, which I saw later, of course. It was hard to see the bruise at the scene that February 3rd because of the lighting, of course. I did look at her fingers. Most significant thing I found was the right thumb, the nail was cracked diagonally. And I thought that possibly might indicate a prior struggle. That's just my mind thinking. But I couldn't, of course, I looked for the nail myself, thinking it might be close to her clothing or on the carpet adjacent. And I saw nothing. But anyway, I didn't see any evidence of bruising to the fingers other than the back of the left hand that I described earlier for you.
Now, as far as the fingernail, did you actually see part of her nail missing?
No, the actual natural nail is present. It's called an acrylic nail. I'm sorry, that's the diagonal one that was missing.
Okay, so acrylic meaning
Not
non-human,
natural.
it's something that's put on?
Correct.
And I'll profess not to be an expert in female nails and what is put on, but what was your understanding as to what was missing?
A fake or acrylic nail.
Okay, was it the type that's painted on or do you know?
I don't know.
Okay, so you don't know whether it's the type that's put on or painted on, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and there was a little sliver that was missing, is that correct?
About a little over a quarter of an inch.
Okay, at the tip of her right finger?
Yes.
Right thumbnail?
Yes.
Okay, so now what I was asking about that I want to kind of focus your attention on, if I can, Dr. Pena, is you examined all of the fingers and all the fingernails, and one of the things that you were looking for would be foreign material, like little traces of skin or blood on the fingers or fingernails. Is that true?
Yes, but our coroner criminalist ultimately would excise those nails and do the scrapings at a. I don't recall if she did it at the scene. I don't think so. It would be at the office.
Okay, in other words, there would be some evidence collection regarding that, even if you don't see something, but you look to see if there's something there, and there's got to be a reason why you look at those nails. Isn't that true?
That's right.
Now, you actually looked at the broken nail or the acrylic, and you looked at that nail a little bit more carefully because the acrylic was broken. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay, why were you looking at that nail a little bit more carefully? Because the acrylic was broken.
I thought there might have been a struggle. That's what I was thinking, and the nail broke. But I don't know the status of that nail, whether it broke at that time or could have broken earlier in the day or the day before. I have no idea.
Okay, so, but you were looking at the nails because if a person is in a struggle and they're fighting with somebody, you might see a little bit of material that might be tissue that could later be tested, correct?
Yes.
Okay, or there might be a little bit of blood under the fingernails or on the portion of the nails that could be tested, and we might be able to find out if that person was in a struggle, one, and two, who that person was in a struggle with.
Correct.
So that's why you looked at it essentially, isn't that
Yes.
correct? And the broken acrylic nail area, that was a particular concern because you saw the broken acrylic. Is that true?
Yes.
So when you looked at, let's say, the little finger on the right hand, did you see any blood or tissue on the little finger?
No.
How about the next finger, the ring finger?
No.
The index finger?
You mean the middle finger?
Right, the middle finger.
No.
The index finger, excuse me. The next
No.
one. And on the thumb that had the broken acrylic, no blood or tissue on that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the same would be true on the left hand. You didn't see any blood or tissue on any of the nails, fingers, etc. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's the type of thing that you do when you go to a scene, because it's a rare event. You look for trace evidence to help you determine what happened or didn't happen. Isn't that correct, Dr. Pena?
Yes.
So in your experience, Dr. Pena, and I take it that you have not had very many cases where a female has died of a self-inflicted intraoral gunshot wound. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Have you had any cases where a female, a woman, has died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, where you were involved in the autopsy and you did the postmortem examination?
Oh, I've had those, not too many, but I've had them.
Just give me a ballpark figure, about 10 to 20 maybe?
That,
Relevance.
Overruled.
that sounds about right.
Okay, so it's not uncommon, and that's not unheard of that can occur. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and you've read literature on this subject, is that correct?
Yes.
And it's discussed in the literature, women who die from intraoral gunshot wounds that are self-inflicted, is that correct?
Yes.
And one of the things that is looked at in the literature, and it's not covered extensively because it's not that common, but that sometimes a fingernail or a piece of acrylic gets broken when a self-inflicted wound by a female occurs because of them triggering the gun. Isn't that true?
That's incorrect.
Have you ever heard of that?
Never heard of it, never seen it.
I'm talking about the literature, because in your cases, you've never seen it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that mean it does not happen?
No, it can happen, it'd be very, very rare from my experience.
Okay. And, okay, do you know what these acrylic nails were made of?
I don't know the brand or the name of it in this particular case. I'm sorry.
Okay, and I don't either, but in any event, have you looked at the literature on the subject of nails being cracked or broken when self-inflicted wounds, deaths occur?
I tried to do that with firearms.
With firearms, with
I
guns.
tried to do that. I couldn't find anything. That was myself.
Excuse me. Did he just ask what brand of acrylic nail it was? What?
Okay, and is that something that, depending upon how much experience you have, you might see it more often than another forensic pathologist?
Objection, that's vague.
Overruled.
That's not true because I checked with some of my staff members, the more senior people who've been there 30, even longer years, and then they've never seen one.
Okay. So the fact that somebody, whether it's a male or female, if they die of an interoral gunshot wound, the fact that their nail is not broken really doesn't mean anything as to whether it was self-inflicted or not. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We've kind of gotten off track a little bit. We were originally talking about blood spatter. I want to kind of get back to that and differentiate the term blowback. That is a little different than blood spatter. And even though you're not an expert in that area, you agree that there's a big difference between those two types of evidence that are involved in a death investigation.
Objection, Your Honor. I think the witness indicated that he didn't know the difference, or didn't have an opinion as to the difference.
Well, it's definitely less appetizing. I can tell you that.
What is your testimony, sir? Do you have an opinion or not?
I'd rather not give one. I'm not comfortable with that.
You say you're not comfortable. Is that because you don't feel that you're qualified to?
That's correct.
All right, the objection sustained.
Now, with reference to a gun, are you comfortable with talking about the subject of how much pressure can be created in an interoral gunshot wound when a weapon is discharged in the mouth? In other words, how much gas can build up in the cranial vault when the gun is discharged?
Objection, foundation.
Well, I think by asking him is he comfortable is sort of asking is he able to offer an opinion. So I'm gonna allow him to answer that.
No.
Okay, so you wouldn't know if there was 1,000 pounds per square inch versus 5 or 10,000 pounds per square inch if a gun is discharged in a mouth. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How would you learn about that if that became a particular question that you needed to address? Would you have to go to the research to do that?
Yes, or a firearms expert perhaps, or a physics type person, they perhaps may know about foot-pounds and forces, et cetera. That may be helpful.
Okay, so a firearms expert would be somebody that knows about guns and ammunition and so forth, but how would that person know about interoral? In other words, what happens when the pressure builds up in a head, for example?
That I don't know. Perhaps they may know of how to go about that, but I certainly don't.
Right. Are there some forensic pathologists that know a lot about that combined area, a gun and a head and the combined issues? In other words, is that a specialty, so to speak, in your field?
Objection, relevance and speculation.
Overruled. He's asking if he knows if such a subspecialty exists. That's the import of the question. Are you aware of any such thing?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
In your direct exam, you talked about blood on the hands. Is that true, Dr. Pena, to some extent?
I'm sorry.
In your direct examination, you talked about blood being on Lana Clarkson's hand or hands, wrists, things like that?
On my direct examination or?
Yeah. Or you talked about that today. Maybe it was in response to one of my questions.
Yeah, I don't recall Mr. Jackson asking that question. I believe I was referring to Ms. Lintonmoot, the coroner criminalist, who saw that there were mislikes, things very small and actually very sparse on the wrist, which is not the back of the hand, and a little part of the hand, but nowhere else, on both left and right sides. I never saw them.
Okay, and Did you see the body before Ms. Lintemoot did her evidence collection?
No, we saw simultaneously together.
Okay, do you know whether she collected any of those stains or not?
She did collect them.
And kept them as evidence, I take it, is that
They were
correct?
turned over to the sheriff's department.
Okay, and do you know if you observed Lana Clarkson's hands and wrists before she collected them or after she collected them, if you can recall?
I cannot recall.
When you noted that there was some of these mist-like stains, or did you know whether they were blowback or blood spatter or what? Were you making a determination one way or the other?
Objection. If I heard the question correctly, it misstates the evidence. If the question was when he saw the blood on her wrist, I don't believe he said that he did see the blood on her wrist.
Rephrase.
You eventually saw some photographs that were taken of the hands and wrists of Miss Clarkson, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and you didn't see the blood that was on her hands or wrist at the time, is that correct?
that's correct.
And there was a big question that was raised in this case because the photographs were of poor quality to document this blood spatter, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and so that became a big issue regarding this investigation, is that also true?
part, yes.
Okay, and you had nothing to do with photographing yourself, is that correct?
No.
But somebody had something to do with that, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and so when the photographs were looked at, there was a big question, is the hands not being photographed accurately, is that also true?
That calls for speculation.
I'm going,
That's not-
it's also the way the question is phrased. It's a big question, so I'm going to sustain the objection, but you may rephrase it.
Were you ever involved in a meeting with Ms. Lintemoot, the head chief medical examiner, Mr. Lakshman, where the issue of poor photography was discussed?
somewhat. That was one of the issues, I believe, yes.
And some lost evidence also by somebody?
Yes,
Okay, and basically a number of concerns were raised by members of the district attorney's office to the coroner's office, and you had a meeting over that, correct?
yes,
And one of the issues was the photography of the hands regarding blood and what was observed or not observed. Is that correct?
yes,
And that was of interest to you because you didn't remember seeing any blood on the hands, and you were relying upon the photography in reaching some of the opinions that you're giving here today. Is that correct?
Objection. That's testimony.
Well, he's asking if it's correct, so he can testify.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt the court. The way it was phrased is he said, you testified that you didn't remember seeing any evidence of blood on the hands. That the witness's testimony is very clear. He's not saying he can't remember. He's saying he did not see blood.
Sustain, rephrase, and you'll do that after the break because we're going to take our recess. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness or present is here before you may resume. Mr. Clark?
Darren, can I have the last question? Was the last question the one that he didn't mean to object on, and then I had to rephrase it? He did mean to object, Your Honor. I take that position.
Cindy?
Look at that. It did what it was supposed to do, and I probably shouldn't have said anything.
Can you read the last question back?
Question, and that was of interest to you because you didn't remember seeing any blood on the hand, and you were relying upon the photography and reaching some of the same opinions that you're giving here today. Is that correct?
Do you remember the question, Dr. Pena, or should I rephrase it?
please rephrase.
The objection was sustained, and counsel was instructed to rephrase the
We're
question.
getting,
I think I'll ask a new question. Your Honor. One of the opinions you gave here today before this jury, did you rely on looking at photographs that were by either investigators from your office or people that were from outside your office of the decedent here, Lana Clarkson?
From our office, yes,
Okay, and did they include photographs, and you were shown some of them on direct examination, of the way the body looked at the scene, is that correct?
yes,
And so along with everything else, you considered photographic evidence in, helping you come to the opinions and conclusions that you're giving regarding this case. Is that true?
Yes.
And does the coroner's office have somebody that documents the way things look at a particular death scene, something looks like at a particular time and place? You would agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, does the coroner's office have a technician or somebody that does that, takes pictures basically at a scene?
We have our autopsy photographers who do go to scenes. That's correct.
Okay, and did you were shown some pictures on direct examination. Were they taken by people in your office or by somebody different?
Those were taken by someone in our office.
Okay, and so how does that, what do they take pictures of? What's the purpose of them taking pictures? If you could explain that to the jury as far as your role in this case.
Well, one would be, of course, for trauma. You want to take both left and right hands in general, and other on the hand for if present, or if there's any pinching from the trigger itself. Sometimes we look for that if indeed a suicide is considered, which of course I have to rule out. You can see that on the shooting hand. That's looked for, but hopefully to get photographed, it depends.
Okay, but photography is an important part of an investigation in a death scene investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And why is it important?
Because that's, given the time frame, between, especially in LA County, between the cases, when the case is done or reviewed and when it goes to trial, it could be a number of years. So we do rely on photos for recollection, especially death.
As part of the photography, is it part of the investigation to take pictures of blood that is either on the hands, wrists, or arms of a decedent?
They'll try, yes.
Okay, was there a problem in this case regarding that?
Yes, there was.
Okay, just tell the jury what the problem was.
Well, I can only tell you what
Well, I was muted. Can you guys see it? Get those legs moving. Come on. There. Good. Almost. Well, he put his head down when he saw the camera. But get those legs moving. Come on. There. Good. Almost. Well, he put his head down when he saw the camera. But
I believe, I'm not a photographer, but I believe the problem here would be the lens itself used in this case. We don't have sometimes the correct lenses to get what are called close-ups to show in detail the features, for instance, on Miss Clarkson's particular hands because of her skin colors too. She's a lot lighter in color.
Okay, and there was some complaint about the fact that the blood that was on her hands and wrists was not properly photographed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Poor photography, basically.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you looked at her hands and did the examination that you have testified about, and you don't remember even seeing it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, with reference to Miss Clarkson and the scene, did you look at her fingers to see if she had any soot from gunshot residue on her hands anywhere?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you observe any?
No.
Okay, and what were you looking for? In other words, I used the term soot and you used that term this morning, and explain to the jury what you would be looking for as it relates to the term soot.
I'd be looking for a black grayish color discoloration, particularly over the shooting hand. In her case, she's right-handed. Of course, at that time, I didn't know that. I checked both hands. Again, it's black grayish, kind of like grease in a way, over the fingers, maybe perhaps of the right hand, back of the hand, thumb, palm part. And again, I didn't see any.
Okay, if somebody had their hands up and somebody shot near their hands, you might find some soot on their hands, even though the bullet missed their hands?
Yes.
And so you didn't see that, is that correct?
Not to my eye, no.
Okay. And there's some swabbing, or which are chemical tests, which are called gunshot residue testing that was done, but you can't visually see all of that, correct?
Correct. It's a sticky adhesive they actually use. That's what it is.
And they're looking for microscopic particles to see whether or not somebody could have shot a gun.
Objection. That's not an evidence beyond the scope of direct examination.
Are you able to answer that question, sir? Do you have the ability to answer that?
I best not. I don't feel comfortable.
All right, the objection sustained.
You rely upon the tests that are done by others as it relates to gunshot residue, the non-visible gunshot residue. Is that correct?
Yes.
In this case, Mr. Steve Dowell, who is a criminalist that works for your office, did some work in this case?
Yes.
You met with him a number of times on that subject. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we'll get to that, but let's get back to the hands and the photography and the fingers and so forth. If somebody discharges a weapon in their mouth, self-inflicted, do you necessarily see soot on their fingers or hands?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, so the absence of that doesn't suggest to you that somebody could not have done that. Is that true?
That's correct.
And there's actually literature on that subject where that is discussed. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, with reference to this blood on the hands, and we will talk about the nature of that, have there been studies on that to determine how often that if somebody shoots themselves that they might end up with blood on their hands or wrists?
Yes.
Okay, and are there some cases, a number of cases, where people shoot themselves and they get absolutely no blood on their hands or wrists?
That's correct.
Okay, so the fact that there is no blood on their hands and wrists doesn't mean that they did not shoot themselves.
That's correct.
Okay, and the fact that if there is blood on their hands or wrists, it just suggests that they may have done that as a result of shooting themselves.
That's partly correct, but you got to think of the flip side too, because the other side is that they could have been in the vicinity as the weapon's being discharged. So if you look at me for a second, another person could be firing the weapon, their hands could be over that weapon, and the blowback, as I've been describing, could be coming out of the mouth, and they're protecting themselves, and it could go onto the hands. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that they're shooting themselves. They could be protecting themselves also. So there's two ways to look at it.
Okay, now you used that term blowback, and as I understand your testimony, though, you're not claiming to be an expert in that blood spatter blowback area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this particular case, did you, as it relates to whatever blood was on Ms. Clarkson's hands or wrist, did you consult with somebody who was an expert that told you about that, or gave you an opinion about that, or wrote a report that you may have read, any of those?
No, I just refer to the literature actually on that. I did discuss informally with some of the older medical examiners in our office about it, and we don't particularly find it very useful, to be honest with you. And the paper, the journal, one journal article I did look at for this case to kind of help me out basically says the same thing.
Was that in the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology?
No, it's a different journal, Forensics, I think International. It's the best one that's in Dr. DeMaio's book that he references.
Okay. Do you happen to know the name of that by chance? The article that you referred to?
I don't have it with me. I can bring it tomorrow if you like.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that, Dr. Pena. If we could have the pictures that the people used, I forget what the exhibit number was. I think it was 40, is it 44?
Which one are you referring to?
The hands?
48 through 51.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Those are not the same.
Okay, let's. Why don't we mark this next in order, Your Honor? And, these are pictures of the decedent's hands at different views.
Double J?
Double J, JJ. You see these photographs, Dr. Pena, that's been marked Defense Exhibit JJ?
Yes,
And are you familiar with these photographs?
yes, I am.
And just like the other photographs that you looked at, they have in some of them, they have the coroner's ruler with the date and the indication that it's at the death scene. Is that correct?
Yes,
And looking at the top left-hand photograph, do you see that where there's appears to be some blood on the bottom of the wrist, and also it looks like a drop of blood somewhat near the web of the hand?
yes.
Okay, do you know whether that's a blood drop or a blood spatter? Or are you really qualified to opinion as to that?
I'm not qualified.
Okay, and so you wouldn't know which direction the blood was going when it hit the hand, and you haven't consulted with anybody on that subject, is that correct?
No,
Okay, and even though you're not an expert as to this blood spatter that was to the extent it was photographed on Ms. Clarkson's hand, you have read some literature, talked to people within your office concerning it, is that correct?
yes,
And this would be the type of spatter that sometimes never occurs, even though somebody dies of a self-inflicted wound. Is that correct?
well, the blood spatter I'm referring to is actually, there's a good picture in Dr. DeMile's book. It's really abundant over the finger areas of the shooting hand and the back of the hand. It's not referring to little drops like that, nor a description like Ms. Lindemann gave in her report. These are very evident, and that's what, at least what I'm looking for, if at all.
Okay. But, and again, this is something you look for references of, but there's some people that die of a self-inflicted gunshot wound that have a lot of this on them, and there's some that have none.
That's correct.
So it runs a range. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And is there a difference when it's an intraoral, inside the mouth wound, as opposed to a wound to the temple? In other words, does that factor into the, if you know?
You know, I don't know that. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know.
Now, if we could look at the other photographs, look at the top of the two to the left, top and bottom. Those are the ones that were of poor quality, that were questioned as to their to whether they were useful or not.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Dr. Pena, did you ever meet with Dr. Lynn Harold regarding this case?
Only at our meetings, in my notes, on the 42 notes, in July and August of 2003, that I document where she's present at the LA County Coroner's Office. And I saw her another time at her office regarding a missing tooth.
Okay, which happened first? Which meeting?
It was July 22nd, I believe.
That was the last meeting, correct?
The last meeting is in August, I believe, around the August, let me check here real quick. It'd be August 14th on the
Okay.
42.
Okay, and when you say 42, is that the form that we were talking about that's a business record for the coroner's office?
Yes,
And it's similar to the other form that we talked about, only it describes a different event, but you still put it in your file, is that correct?
yeah, these are title worksheets, by the way.
Okay, so 42 is a worksheet, basically.
Yes,
Okay, and it might deal with either a scene investigation or a meeting where you document what occurs and what information you might get at the meeting.
yes,
And if you had meetings, let's say with somebody from the district attorney's office, you would use this same form, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so you had two meetings with Dr. Lynn Harold, and she actually doesn't work for the coroner's office, does she?
No,
She is a person that works for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory.
yes,
She's what's known as a criminalist, is that correct?
yes.
And do you know whether or not, based upon your meetings with her, whether she deals with the issue of blood spatter or blood flowback or any subject like that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know that one.
Okay, so obviously you didn't discuss that with her in these meetings, I take it, is that correct?
Probably not, no.
And did you get any reports from her, written reports or things that came to you either by email or whatever regarding blood spatter or blowback or anything like that?
No.
Okay, so the only information you got from Dr. Harold was from these two meetings that you talked about, correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that one of the meetings was regarding the subject of lost evidence and really didn't deal with the specifics of the case as far as her criminalistic work. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, was that first or which one was first, if you remember?
Oh, the first meeting is a general meeting with most of the crime lab people from the LA Sheriff's Department. That's the one in July. The second one is on August 14th, because we're getting close at that point, trying to figure out when to close the case. We still need all the information from the crime lab, all the reports. We wanted to see them, then we turn them immediately back over to the crime lab. Those don't become part of our file. And ultimately, I had another meeting with Lynn Harrell. That's the one we were referring to with the tooth, which is later.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the first business meeting, meaning the one that where you're really talking about information that she was trying to give you information that might help you with your job. Is that correct?
Yes,
Even though she worked with a different agency.
correct.
And so that happened on the 22nd of July of 2003. Is that correct?
Yes,
And in addition to her being at the meeting, do you have a note and a record of that meeting?
yes, I do.
And did you detail who was there and what the meeting was about and what information you learned that was pertinent to this case?
Yes,
And just like your notes of the scene investigation, you were obligated to keep this in the file, and you have done that. Is that correct?
yes.
And accurately record what information you learned. Is that also true?
Correct.
So at the meeting, looks like Detective Mark Lillenfeld. Is that correct?
Yes.
And another detective, I can't read
Oh,
his
that's
name.
Paul Fournier.
Fournier, okay. And then Mr. Carroll, I think you mentioned he had something to do with guns. Is that correct?
Yes,
And did he give you information that you considered in this case also, Mr. Carroll?
yes,
And then there was another detective by the name of Katz. Is that true?
yes.
And another lieutenant something?
That's Daniel Rosenberg, Rosenberg.
Okay, and then Miss Nelson is also there,
Yes,
and Miss Lintamoot is also there. Is that correct?
correct.
So basically, it's a meeting about this case with all the people that are dealing with some of the forensic evidence involved in this case. Is that true?
Yes.
And did Miss Lintamoot, for example, explain to you in that meeting about the blood being on the hands, or did that subject come up at all?
Not at that time, no.
Now, when you were at this meeting, was it arranged so that you could come to a final opinion in this case?
It was mainly to give us an update where they were with their studies on all the evidence, because there's so much to go through. And I did get some information at this time, but it was a preliminary, they call it. And that's what I was noting.
Okay, so did Miss Harold talk to you about blood that was on the gun?
Yes,
And did she talk to you about DNA testing that was done on the gun?
yes,
And did she talk to you about DNA testing that was done on the non-blood-stained areas of the gun?
yes,
And did you learn in this meeting, and did you take into consideration the information that you received through the Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory, along with Dr. Harold, that all of the DNA testing on both the blood-stained areas and the non-blood-stained areas came back to Lana Clarkson?
correct.
And do you know anything about DNA testing at all, Dr. Pena?
No, I'm not up to date on that, no.
Okay, well, you know something about it, I take it. Is that correct?
Very little, but
Like we were talking about this morning a little bit, or
Do you guys think that Phil is medicated? Do you think he's medicated, or do you think he's just trying to stare down the witnesses? Because I don't know. He doesn't look. He kind of looks like he's zoned out. He kind of looks like he's staring them down, but at the same time, he kind of looks like he's just zoned, you know? I don't know. It's just creepy. He just looks creepy. I can't tell. I don't know. Did the medical, I didn't stop it just to comment on his creepiness. Did the medical examiner say why he determined it homicide instead of unaliving herself? Because if he did, I missed it. Because I was so aggravated with StreamYard crashing every 5 minutes. You guys probably missed it too, because it crashed every 5 minutes. Because he did say it was homicide. Because I remember saying, when are you going to say matter of death? Because he kept laying the groundwork for why he said cause of death. And I was like, manner of death? Come on, manner of death. And he finally said homicide. And then I don't know if he went on to explain why he got to homicide. Does it? Okay, I hadn't noticed a change. I just know like the stare. Scott Rouse, who is one of the behavior panel guys, he has his own channel where he does a lot of videos on this psychopathic stare, and I haven't watched them. I think I've watched bits and pieces maybe of some of them, but I haven't like watched the whole series because he's like, it's not what you think it is, but that looks like it to me. I don't know. But I still don't know if the medical examiner like laid out the differences, because how do you tell with that being done in the mouth? How do you tell the difference? Because like he said, if someone is going to do that to you, you're going to have your hands up on the gun. So I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I tend to do that. So I don't know.
Earlier, actually, about the blood or tissue that can be under fingernails. And when there's a struggle that if you see it, you for sure want to collect it because you can do DNA testing on it, correct?
Yes.
And even if you don't see it, they cut the fingernails off and they test it to see if there's some foreign biological material that would go to a person that is other than the person you cut the fingernails from. Is that correct?
Correct.
It wouldn't be a big interest to find somebody's DNA under their own fingernails. That's not the issue, is it?
Right.
Okay. So you always expect to find their DNA. Is that true?
Yes.
It's when you have foreign DNA that it becomes important as it relates to fingernails and guns and objects, correct?
Yes.
And do you know enough about DNA to know that basically there can be trace amounts of DNA on objects that people just touch and handle?
Objection.
If you know.
No, the bottom line is I'm going to sustain the objection. If you have a specific question, you can go ahead and ask it, and we'll see if he's able to answer it.
You would be fun at a theme park, Judy. You would be so much fun. Because I do that at a theme park, and I'm like, Travis, what? Look at her outfit. Yeah, so what? Who wears that to a theme park? Her butt is hanging out of those shorts.
Did Ms. Harold, in addition to talking about the gun and the DNA testing that was done on the blood-stained areas as well as the non-blood-stained areas, and all of that DNA identified to herself, Lana Clarkson, did you talk about any DNA testing that was done on the bullets that were in the gun?
Objection. Assumes facts not evidence phrased concerning the non-blood-stained portions of the gun.
Sustained to the way the question was phrased, you may rephrase it.
We already talked about the gun. Is it your understanding, or was it your understanding when you had this meeting back in July of 2003, that there were some bullets in the gun that were not fired?
Yes.
Okay, there was one bullet that was fired, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that would be still in the gun, the casing would still be in the gun, and it would have you could tell what it looked like because there would be no projectile in the casing, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And there were 5 bullets that were not fired, is that correct?
yes,
Okay. And do you, at this particular meeting, do you remember discussing the Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory testing of the bullets that were not fired?
no,
Okay. Do you remember discussing anything with Mr. Carroll regarding the weapon and the particular features of that particular weapon?
no,
Okay, so other than what we've already talked about, did you talk about the test firing of that weapon?
yes.
Okay, and what was it about the test firing that was of import to you or importance to you, if any, at that meeting?
Well, he test fired it, and I have 2 numbers here from muzzle to target. So I was describing to you earlier this morning, he gives one measurement at 2 inches as a test fire. He's considering the oral of 2 inches from muzzle to target, and another one about 3 inches. Well, it tells me that it's loosely held in the mouth, so it's not a tight contact wound or tight contact or forced down the throat, but it's loosely held, as I'm demonstrating now, behind the teeth in the mouth.
Okay. When you say 2 to 3 inches to the target, what do you mean by target? What do you,
Where it ultimately will end up or go through, the first tissue to strike.
okay? And how did Mr. Carroll make that determination that you relied upon?
Objection, call suspect.
Sustain.
What did Mr. Carroll tell you that helped you in evaluating this particular case?
We did not get into that part.
Okay, he gave you a range, 2 to 3 inches?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know what he did to come to that conclusion?
Well, he test fires the weapon, but I don't know how that's done.
Okay, so you relied upon that conclusion, basically, that he gave you, is that true?
Yes.
And based upon all the information that you had, did you have any information that the weapon was 2 to 3 or more than 3 inches from the target?
No, I didn't.
Closer than 2 inches to the target?
No.
Okay, so you relied upon that as being the range from the target, which is the back of the throat, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now you measured this wound that was on the tongue, and this the stellite wound, is that correct?
Yes, stellate, that's correct.
Okay, and the stellite wound, is that caused by the bullet itself, or does the gas from the gun that's ejected have anything to do with how that wound is made?
It'd actually be more from the bullet.
Okay, and do the gases contribute to that wound at all?
They can actually.
Is that a little beyond your expertise as to, you mentioned that you're not overly familiar with gunshot wound gases and pressures and so forth, so is that something that's a little bit outside the range of your qualifications?
Yes.
Okay. So did you learn anything else in this meeting as to the results of any testing? Like, let's say, for example, the results of the sexual assault kit or anything like that?
The sexual assault kit was negative.
Okay. And what's meant by that? If you could explain to the jury what is involved in that conclusion.
That means when the swabs were tested for in the laboratory, they do not match to anyone's DNA or nothing that's picked up. So there's no ejaculatory material, et cetera, if I understand that correctly.
Okay. If I could have next in order, Your Honor.
That would be KK.
KK. And that would be this note that's dated 7/22/03, 24/29. Dr. Pena, I've marked this note that we've been talking about that references this meeting, and you put some of your opinions and conclusions in this note. Is that correct? And is that correct?
Yes.
Now, eventually you authored a formal autopsy report and signed it and basically issued the case out. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was eventually done like in September. Is that true?
Yes.
And you actually started writing it, though, in July. In fact, the July 29th, shortly after this meeting. Is that true?
Yes.
In fact, your opinions and conclusions were basically the 29th of July of '03, and then it just took you a lot of time to kind of get it typed up and edited and so forth. Is that true?
Actually, the gap there was we're waiting for some actually final reports to come in, and there were vacation periods for the sheriff people, and then there's also the cases on security hold. So we didn't want anything to leak out, and we wanted to make sure that, double check everything because of the nature of the case being what's called a high profile, and that's why there was a little time gap between July and up to September.
So at the conclusion of this particular meeting, you make a statement in here called physical evidence will not answer mode. And what did you mean by mode?
Oh, that's a sloppy term. I should say manner of death. That's the same thing, but I prefer to say manner, but I wrote mode.
Okay.
I was at that time, I remember Miss Lynn Harold, Dr. Harold was talking with me, and she said the investigation issue will, but that's in July. So I need to make that clear that things can change. And I know in August when we have our next meeting, it essentially boils down to the totality of evidence. So it wasn't one single piece of item that was going to answer the manner of death in this case. We had to take into consideration everything that we've gone through.
Now, let me ask you this question, Dr. Pena. In the field that you're involved in, do you ever use the term or have an opinion that you hold to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Not in our office in general, no.
So when you give an opinion like something could have happened, do you value that at all as being more likely than not? Or, what do you mean by that when you give an opinion that something is like consistent with?
It generally means it's favorable, but there's enough evidence to support it. Could it be something else? Certainly. Nothing's 100% in our field, and most medical examiners realize that. And later on, even new information can come in after a case has been closed. And that's why when you read my opinion, if you look at the very last sentence I write, based on the history and circumstances as currently known, the manner of death in this case is homicide. Doesn't mean later if I get information or further input that could change.
Even today?
No, not today, no.
Okay, so it never will change after today?
No.
Okay. Now, with reference to your opinion, I'm showing you Exhibit KK. Basically, you make this statement, physical evidence will not answer mode. INV, investigation issue will, is that correct?
Yes.
Am I reading your note accurately?
Yes.
And does it have to do with the investigation outside of the Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory?
Yes.
And so that's like statements, you mentioned statements after.
Oh, that's actions.
Actions, okay, et cetera, indicate homicide. And then there's something under that, and I can't read that. Could you tell us what that is?
Sorry, need to review these. Let LA Sheriff's Department comment on ballistics.
Okay. Need summary.
LA Sheriff's Department on basis for homicide.
Yeah, okay, and so when you say LA Sheriff's Department, you're not talking about the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory, you're talking about the investigative arm of the Sheriff's Department, is that correct?
At that time, yes.
Okay, so you were still waiting on that, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you ever get that?
Yes.
Okay, and did you get that verbally or in writing?
If I recall, that's mainly verbally.
Okay, verbally from the detectives?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll close, need Dr. Sherry's presence something 2 weeks, is that correct?
Yes.
And then we had the vacations and that got delayed a little bit, essentially, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, as far as the cause of death, that's a medical finding, essentially, the cause of death being a bullet wound that caused damage to certain areas of the body. Is that true?
Yes.
And have you ever used the term, well, you have used the term to a reasonable degree of medical certainty in giving opinions in your field as to cause of death. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you use that term, well, let me ask you this. Can you state to this jury at this time, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Lana Clarkson died of an intraoral gunshot wound to the head and neck?
Yes.
Okay. And is there any question or doubt about that in your mind, Doctor?
No.
Okay. And the basis of your opinion would be all the physical evidence and medical findings that you either observed at the scene, saw at the autopsy, or learned as far as testing afterwards to areas of the body.
That's correct.
And one of the experts that you relied upon is a person that uses the term odontologist. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is an odontologist?
They're basically dentists.
Okay, it's a dentist who deal with issues relating to death and investigative issues regarding teeth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and one of the options that you have when you look into a case is that you can ask other people who are more specialized as doctors or medical professionals to do certain work. Is that correct?
Yes.
Like you mentioned, the toxicology work, and you mentioned, the criminalists doing some work, and, gunshot residue people, and another one is odontology, correct?
Yes.
So what did the odontologist do to contribute to your understanding of this case?
Basically, when I was at the death scene, I found present on the carpet area and also part of the stairway of the home, what I thought were tooth fragments. And I alerted the sheriff's department. They collected them because their upper two front teeth are gone, basically, and shattered. So I wanted the odontologist, to verify that and see if indeed these belong to Ms. Clarkson.
One of the things that you wanted to know is whether or not there were any tooth particles that had what is referred to as bullet wipe on them. Is that correct?
Oh, that'd be part of it, yes.
Okay, and this would be to the teeth that were in the mouth that did not get dislodged. Is that correct?
That I don't remember.
But the particles of teeth that were basically not in the mouth, you wanted to have them analyzed for what's called bullet wipe. Is that true?
Correct.
And who takes care of that? Does the odontologist do it, or does somebody else do it?
I believe that would be the crime lab.
And that would be Mr. Dowell. Is that correct?
Mr. Dell or the crime lab people could do it.
Okay, Mr. Dowell works in your office.
Yes.
He's a criminalist also.
He's actually called a tool analysis.
Okay. And why did you want these tooth particles that were found at the scene that you helped locate looked at for bullet wipe?
Actually, I don't recall myself requesting that.
Okay. Why is it looked for? In other words, what would be the reason for looking for that?
Oh, well, basically it would confirm that, first of all, bullet wipe, is that your term you're using?
That's
bullet wipe. Basically, again, when a bullet comes out, the muzzle down the barrel, it's taking soot with it and grease also. Don't worry about the term lead, that's a misnomer that's used sometimes, but it's grease and gunpowder coming out. And it doesn't tell you anything about distance. It just tells you the soot. And to be honest with you, I don't know what part it would play in this case because it doesn't tell you anything about range of fire, as far as I know, bullet wipe. So anyway.
Well, if there was some traces of the bullet on the teeth, it would indicate the gun was outside the mouth, wouldn't it? Wasn't that the reason for doing the testing?
Yes.
Okay, and do you recall asking that be done?
I don't recall.
Do you recall being at a meeting when that was requested?
I don't recall.
Now, in addition to meeting with people, do you also express your opinion to attorneys in any way? In other words, that you meet with somebody who might be prosecuting a case? Do you ever do that?
Only after a case is closed and cause of death is official and manner of death is official, and that report is signed, then and only then do we meet with both defense counsel if needed, or anybody for that matter, on assign the case.
Okay, and do you remember meeting with anybody from the district attorney's office in October of 2003, within about a month of your issuing this case?
Yes.
Okay, and do you remember Mr. Dixon being there and a number of other deputy DAs?
Yes.
And do you remember taking notes of that meeting?
Yes, I do.
And do you have those notes in your official file and part of the record in this case?
Yes.
And when you meet and take notes, sometimes you give information to them and you note what you say. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you do that in this particular case?
Yes.
And did you do it accurately to the best of your ability?
Yes.
And on one of these forms, Form 42, same type of forms that you used as to these other aspects of the case. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. 2421, next in order, Your Honor.
Could be double L.
Double L. I want you to look at the top of this document. It's a pages of notes. Do you recognize this document, Dr. Pena?
Yes.
If you look at the top, it gives the date of October 14th, and then it tells you who's present at the meeting, and this is all your handwriting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you took these notes at or about the time that the event occurred, the meeting occurred. Is that true?
Yes.
Now, and it lists everybody there. The deputy DA is present. DRLS, is that Dr. Laschlaman, the head medical examiner?
Yes.
Your boss, essentially. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And it said that Dr. Sherry happened not to be there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you recall during the course of this meeting giving your statements regarding the issues regarding cause and manner of death?
Let me see here. Do you don't mind?
Yeah. Do you want to take a moment to review this note to refresh your recollection as to this meeting?
Just about half a minute. Thanks.
Sure. Take a minute. Let me know when you're done.
Okay.
Okay. Do you get a chance to look at that?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Does that help you out at all as far as remembering what was discussed and some of the opinions you had? And this was after you issued your final report. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You give a number of reasons, basically 4 reasons why you felt this was a homicide as opposed to not a suicide or self-inflicted wound. Is that correct?
Yes, but one thing I need to make clear on these notes, these do not become part of the official autopsy report per se, but they do become the official reports of the autopsy file. So there's a difference. But I'm thinking out loud in this meeting, and I'm trying to think of ways of anatomically when we get into this. That's what I'm doing here. So when you hear this, I'm thinking on my feet. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Very good. I want to go to reason number 3 here. Blowbacks, blood on hand to steady nozzle is not present. There's no blood on the hand is what you were saying?
That's correct.
Okay. And at the time you had this meeting, that was your opinion as to whether or not there was blood on the hand. Is that correct?
I was given, one opinion. That's correct.
Okay. And basically you were giving an opinion as a result of a question made by a DA by the name of Kevin McCormick, I would presume. Is that correct?
That's
somebody
correct.
You know?
Yes.
And Mr. Dixon, this distinguished gentleman here, right in court, was there also?
Yes.
And basically what he posed to you was a question after you signed this case out as a homicide that basically he asked you without any information from the crime lab, you couldn't say this was a homicide. Is that essentially what you said?
That's correct.
Okay, and I just want to make sure I understand your note here.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I just want to clarify that. I'm being asked that question by Mr. McCormick, wanting to know, just from the autopsy alone, without outside input from the crime lab, is it possible to say this is still a homicide?
And your answer was no.
That's correct.
Okay. And when you say the crime lab, in other words, you're talking about the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't include your own crime laboratory in the coroner's office because you definitely considered all that well before this, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what was it from the crime lab that told you that this was a homicide that you answered in response to Mr. McCormick's question in the presence of Mr. Dixon and others?
Basically, that includes everything from the statement that I made earlier, which is part of the LA Sheriff's Department. The statement made, the ballistics about the gun manipulation or being wiped was quite important. That was discussed. And again, Dr. Hill will go into more detail on that. The alleged perpetrator, the left front pocket that I described this morning with the blood, significant blood stains that I described for you was present, was very important. And there were other clothing articles that came in that I did not put on this form because they came in at a later time. And in fairness to counsel, I did not want to muddy the waters, but there's about 3 or 4 other items that come in, which Dr. Harrell will go through for you. And, but this was sufficient for me at that time. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
There was 4 things that you mentioned. You gave your 4 reasons. One was the wiping of the gun, that you relied on that as a key fact. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then also that it was people who shoot themselves don't do so in private.
I'm sorry, they do so
in private versus public. Okay,
That's correct.
And then third was the blood on the hand, and at that time you mistakenly understood that there was none. Is that correct?
That's right.
And then later on, some people from
No
the
objection, Your Honor. That assumes facts, not evidence. That is not what the witness said. That the way the question was phrased, you mistakenly assumed there was none on the hand. The witness has indicated.
Staying to the form of the question, just rephrase it.
okay, your note says that blood on the hand to steady the nozzle is not present. Am I reading that line correctly?
Yes.
Okay, and did I say nozzle or muzzle? The muzzle, that's the end of the gun, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And fourth, she did not know where the weapon was in the residence.
Correct.
Those are the 4 reasons that you gave at this time when you were meeting with the prosecutorial attorneys that were discussing this case with you at that time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, when somebody dies of an intraoral gunshot wound, does anything else come out of the mouth other than blood?
You could get some residual tissue from the oral cavity, called our mucosa, or just, we all have it, it's moist on our gums. Mm-hmm. Part of that can come out, though you won't see it sometimes to your eye, but some of the tissue can come out. I've rarely seen brain for that, from that area, given the location, like the spinal column I told you about earlier, the spinal cord, to come out, given that location that Ms. Clarkson had suffered. Brain I have, if it's to the skull, that'll come out. And mainly that's it.
Okay, and do you consider what happens to that tissue and that matter as it relates to manner of death and how the death occurred?
I'm sorry, the tissue that comes out?
In other words, if there's some on the people that are involved?
Oh, no.
Okay. How far can that go? In other words,
I've never,
Are you able to answer that question based on your own expertise, or are you unable? Just tell me one way or the
I
other.
can answer that question.
The objection's overruled.
Guys, I'm sorry, as medical examiners, we can only deal with what's inside that body. Anything that comes outside of that body, whether it be blood, tissue, under the coat, that's nice to know it's there. It's on the right side, left side. That's great. But what are you going to do with it? That's the other question. It's very difficult to determine from that and make assessments of that, of where a perpetrator may be or where the shooter may be. I've seen this done before by other people. It's not correct. It's not science because there's so many variables. That's where I have a problem. Now, but it's okay to describe it. It's okay to run. It's very academic. It's interesting. I'm sorry. Do that again.
But it's okay to describe it, it's okay.
It's okay to note it, but to interpret it is, in our medical examiner profession, I don't know any medical examiners that would even try to do that.
Yeah, Dr. Pena, you were asked a number of questions about the angle that the bullet went in, and if a person was standing up straight, it was in a slightly upward trajectory, the bullet path, assuming the anatomically up and down position. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But you don't have an opinion as to whether the head was tilted forward, backward, or anything such as that. Is that true?
That's right.
Now, in addition to something coming out of the mouth, is tissue and blood, does it ever get expelled from the nose in an intraoral gunshot wound?
I've seen it mainly from the mouth, and I'm sure it depends on the devastation of the cavity, because we're all connected, our sinuses, et cetera. It can't come out the nose.
And the gases go in and they got to come out in somewhere, either the mouth or the nose, essentially. Is that correct?
Part of it, yes.
And when they come out, tissue and blood and whatever else comes out with it. Is that true?
True.
And you don't have an expertise and you can't really tell us what happens to it once it gets out and what it might mean. Is that also correct?
Because as medical examiners, we do not do that. That's why I can't tell you anything.
Have you looked at any research or medical research in the field of forensic pathology on this subject?
There is none.
Okay. None that you're aware of. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there might be some that you're not aware of, is what you're saying?
That begs the question, obviously.
Do you know whether there is any that you're just not aware of? In other words, have you heard about it but not looked at it?
He said he's not aware of it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the best answer he can give you.
What's the court's pleasure on time? My watch says
4 o'clock. You have a ways to go?
Yes.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our evening recess. Keep in mind the admonition will resume tomorrow at 9:30. The witness is excused. You're not to discuss your testimony with anyone except the attorneys. All right, 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Do that now or tomorrow morning. I'm happy to be there at 9 or 9:15.
If you're prepared.
One of the pleasures, the one that I think is important is our request to defer other certain witnesses.
Okay.
If they're next up, we need to have some idea of where that's going. And tomorrow morning would be fine, but for now, if the court's prepared to.
There's an in limine motion to preclude rebuttal witnesses from being called in the people's case in chief. I've read and considered.
And
Okay, it's your motion.
my motion, and I think it's well taken, that that's not appropriate, because these witnesses have been called. I don't have anything to add other than what I said in the motion as far as our reasons, and who the witnesses are and so forth. So.
Okay, thank you. People?
Your Honor, we don't think they're rebuttal witnesses. The court has basically heard a very long 402 motion on this, if you view it in a certain way. We believe that Stan White's testimony plus Sarah Kaplan's testimony indicates that evidence was taken from the crime scene, and Stan White describes what that evidence was, a fingernail with lead wipe or bullet wipe on it. Sarah Kaplan's testimony seems to back that up. We now have a picture of what we believe it is, and the next level of evidence or the next series of witnesses here is going to be crime scene, and then we were going to follow up with Stan White, who says something else was there at the crime scene, describe it. Sarah Kaplan would describe it also, and Lynn Harold through the photographs could say, well, if what Stan White describes is it, then she would tell us what, in her scientific opinion, that means. We think this is part of our affirmative case, and we believe it's admissible now. We don't think we are limited to just rebutting Dr. Henry Lee. If Henry Lee never testified, we still think evidence of this fingernail with lead wipe on it is admissible in our case in chief in front of this jury. That's why we noticed the witnesses over the weekend.
Okay, thank you. Anything further?
No.
All right, the evidence has two purposes. If all it was being done or being used for would be to rebut Dr. Lee, then obviously until Dr. Lee testified, it wouldn't be relevant. But in this case, it has the secondary purpose. It shows that certainly the possibility of evidence being removed, which besides impeaching Dr. Lee, it goes to show that the people have been prevented from putting on certain evidence and evaluating certain evidence that may be highly relevant. And the jury has a right to determine that in seeing the case that's being presented to them by the prosecution. So it has independent relevance, and therefore it doesn't have to wait till rebuttal.
Does that, just to articulate the position of the ruling of the court, for example, Mr. Diamond is one of these witnesses, and because I didn't hear him say anything in this.
Well, if you look at, I assume, it's people's choice to call Mr. Diamond, that although his testimony differs from the others, I suppose they can argue that he's just wrong as to the person he saw it with, and that in essence they're talking about the same event. I don't know.
Your Honor, I can clarify that.
All right.
I talked with Mr. Rosen about this. At this point, we don't believe that we're going to be calling Mr. Diamond. We do believe that we will be calling the rest of the witnesses that we've noted. I'm happy to reveal those to the court also, but we sent Mr. Rosen an email over the weekend on that. There's a number of other witnesses that are included, but at this point, I don't think we'll be calling Mr. Diamond.
Okay.
There's one other matter.
Yes.
I filed a motion regarding the privileged nature of some comments and discussions Mr. Shapiro had with Mr. Dixon and Mr. Foreman.
Do people have a chance to reply to that yet?
Well, I read it. I'm happy to discuss it here. I don't see that these were privileged at all. There was no discussion at the time about any privileged material. In fact, a conversation was said to me and to Kevin McCormick at the time. I just can't imagine how these are privileged.
Well,
Mr. Bruno?
this, first of all, they're going to resolve the case, and I'm sorry. First of all, according to Mr. Shapiro, these conversations were an effort to resolve the case. They certainly fit within a broader penumbra of what might be considered negotiations. Negotiations are forbidden except for impeachment and limited purposes. Mr. Dixon may have a different interpretation, but Mr. Shapiro said, they were talking about the case according to the information from Mr. Shapiro. Mr. Shapiro was saying this case is not prosecutable, you have these weaknesses, you made these mistakes, the investigation was inadequate, don't file it, you can't win it. To me, that's a negotiating type of statement. Mr. Shapiro says his intent in making those statements were to try to settle the case. In that regard, by preventing the case from being filed or dissuading the prosecution from filing the case in the first place. That certainly sounds like a type of negotiation statement to me. And that was what Mr. Shapiro's intent was, according to his lawyer, she related to me. So I think that, I don't think we can categorically say that because the case wasn't filed, it's not a negotiation, or because the prosecution didn't consider it to be forensic in nature, although I don't know what else it would have been. I think that there has to be some sort of determination of that. And just, if I can, while I've got the floor. The court had, in the earlier ruling concerning Ms. Kaplan, Mr. White, and those folks, indicated that this evidence would in no way be held against Mr. Spector. I think that at some point prior to this evidence being offered, this keeps growing, the scope and purpose of the evidence, it seems to us, but at any event, some admonition to the jury as to the purpose of this evidence and the use of this evidence and its inapplicability to Mr. Spector's having anything to do with it needs to be formed, because I think that this is highly prejudicial evidence beyond the speculative nature of it and beyond the uncertainty of it. That uncertain evidence comes in, that's not the problem, but it does lead to speculation, and it could lead to speculation that is specifically unwarranted against Mr. Spector. So you need to think about something along those lines.
They're two separate issues now. One, you're arguing about bringing in the conversation. I assume you're talking about the declaration filed by Mr. Shapiro during this conversation that you guys missed something.
I filed, it's quadruple hearsay at this point. I filed a declaration informing the court of what Ms. Levine told me when Mr. Spector said, what Mr. Shapiro said, and why he said it, just to get it before the court. The people basically have said the same thing, that they have proffered a portion of that conversation. Mr. Shapiro said you missed something, and our team found it. Without any statement as to what it was or how it was relevant or anything about that. Ms. Levine tells me that Mr. Shapiro's position is that was part of a negotiation or an effort to resolve the case. That's that part. My letter comments had to do with Mr. Plort's.
Okay. Mr. Dixon?
Well, Mr. Bruno kind of just made my point. The declarations by, not only me, but Kevin McCormick is to Robert Shapiro's statements don't on their face have anything to do with settlement. In fact, my recollection is, and I could be wrong, but the case had already been filed and Mr. Shapiro had come to the office to pick up some discovery when he made this statement. In the statement, you got, and the exact statement's in the declarations, but basically the Sheriff's Department or you forgot something that we picked up at the crime scene has nothing to do with negotiations at all. And I just don't think that it's privileged under that discussion at all. And secondly, we are, with respect to the second issue, we are not in any way asking that the Dr. Henry Lee issue, the Stan White issue, be viewed by the jury as consciousness of guilt by the defendant. Not at all. Well, in fact, in the motion that in the jury instruction, proposed jury instruction that we filed, we made that very clear.
Do you have anything else to offer on the question of whether this is part of a negotiation discussion? Because it doesn't appear to be.
Well, the problem is that Miss Levine wouldn't discuss it with me because Mr. Shapiro felt it was privileged. And while I consider myself to be a privilege holder, apparently they didn't. So I think that, I mean, I can try to get them to say more, but I think we need to devote a few minutes to either have Mr. Shapiro generally state what the basis of his position that it was privilege because negotiation, or have Ms. Levine tell us that because I put in what she told me.
Well, first of all, I don't know that her statement, and this is obviously no disrespect to Ms. Levine, isn't the person to do it. I think it seems to me, if you're asking me to make a determination as to whether any statement that was made would have been privileged, it's going to be the people that were there that are going to talk about it. It's not going to be the attorney for one of them. So if you want to call Mr. Shapiro as a witness, certainly you can do that, and the district attorney can call Mr. McCormick, or Mr. Dixon can testify, as the case may be, and the court will hear all the evidence and make a determination whether it appears to be privileged. Right now, I don't believe so from what you told me, but I'm not going to preclude you. That is a separate matter from whether the jury should be admonished. And Mr. Dixon, it doesn't make any difference really what the people are using it for. There's a danger there that the jury might think that. I think it would be appropriate to have an admonition when that evidence comes in.
And if I could just clarify, it'll be Mr. McCormick who will be the witness.
Fine.
Just one matter, Your Honor, procedurally, since we're asserting privilege that is within the general, again, penumbra of the attorney-client privilege, that's what 1153 of the evidence code and 1192.4. I believe that once we assert it, the people have the burden of proof to establish by a preponderance that the communications were not privileged. So I don't think.
Well, first of all, a declaration has to be subject to cross-examination, and other than that, you don't have any evidence. I mean, you have this all of a sudden the statement through Mr. Shapiro's attorney that, oh, by the way, when I made the statement, or whatever statement was made, because later apparently he retracts it.
Okay, I agree with that point. I think that if Mr. Shapiro is called, then as a voir dire question, first question is, did you consider this matter to be privileged? If he says yes, then I think that the people have the burden of establishing that it was not privileged.
I think after the question, assuming that the question is asked, did you consider it privilege, and the answer is yes, the next question is why. I don't think that automatically shifts to there has to be more than a bald assertion. There has to be some basis for it.
No pun, I assume, on the nature of the assertion.
Are you casting follicle jokes my way, Mr. There's no peril there. You don't have to worry. Your time will come sooner or later.
But we're just trying to alert the court.
Well, we can have a hearing. I mean, the bottom line is that the people are going to call Mr. Shapiro or Mr. McCormick, but then be prepared to have your witnesses present.
Well, Mr. Shapiro is the witness, so
okay.
Calling will be here.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Mr. McCormick's on the witness list also.
Okay. Let's see. And the other one is you filed your trial brief, which you've already discussed. You filed the rebuttal. And what about the compliance, the discovery compliance?
Yeah, it's been represented to me that Dr. Pena has no more notes or whatever associated with anything he reviewed recently. We were notified by email, I want to say Thursday or Friday, I'm not sure which, but that he had this new opinion. It was just an email that said that the bruising on the left side of the tongue was consistent with trauma. Other than that, we asked for any notes associated with any new stuff that he did or tissues that he reviewed, and it's been represented to us that he has none. So once they represented that to us, there's really no discovery issue unless that turns out not to be correct. In particular, there were a number of notes in Dr. Pena's file where he said he wanted to get data on suicide wounds and things like that, but he apparently never got the data. So that's one thing that we're going to get into. And then he was given all these materials from the district attorney's office, hundreds and hundreds of pages. And the letter went to him and Dr. Lochstamen, and we asked for the notes associated with his review of that data and the fact that it was in the file, but apparently it never got to the file for some reason. In other words, he was told us he never reviewed any of that. So given that, there's no discovery, assuming that's correct.
Okay.
I have to assume that's correct. That's what Dr. Pena has indicated to us.
All right. Thank you.
So I have one last.
Yes.
Since we're going to have a hearing involving Mr. Shapiro, I don't know if there were any notes taken from any of the parties present, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Dixon, as to the statements, if anything contemporaneous was prepared. I don't know if there would be a work product or other privilege asserted, but if there are notes, I think that at minimum they ought to be presented to the court to determine if they have any relevance to the content of the meeting.
I don't believe there are any notes. The declarations were prepared soon thereafter.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Counsel, the district attorneys are present, the jurors and alternates are present, the witness previously sworn and still under oath is on the stand. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Payne. I wanted to kind of pick up a little bit where we left off yesterday. Get the podium situated where it should be. You recall we were talking about some meetings that you had with some people from the district attorney's office, and they were asking you questions and you were giving a reply to those?
Yes.
Okay, and from time to time, would it be correct, Dr. Pena, that you would meet with the prosecuting attorneys and discuss concerns, and then also have meetings at your office with the people that work there about their concerns?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to have another, Dr. Pena, did you have a meeting on February 26th of 2004 that generated a typed memo that was put in the coroner's official file? And I could show it to you to refresh your recollection. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay, and you were present at that meeting, and that memo recorded what was discussed at that meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and could we have marked next in order the memo that's dated 2/26/04 and it's discovery page 2410?
Double M.
Thank you. M&M, Dr. Pena, and I'm going to ask that be put up on the screen here as soon as we can find.
I'm sorry, I send objection unless there's a foundation lay that is an actual business record rather than simply minutes taken at a meeting. It's hearsay.
Sustained.
I'll lay the foundation.
Just a second, hold on.
Dr. Pena, I have a copy of it if you can't find yours. Would you like me to show you my copy?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Dr. Pena, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit MN. I'm sorry. Just before court, I showed you this to see if you recognized it, and you did. This is Exhibit double M. Do you?
Yes.
Okay, would this be one of the coroner's records on a Form 42 that was actually typed versus handwritten?
Yes.
And does it accurately reflect a business record for the coroner's office that documents a meeting on the date set forth in that document, MM?
Yes.
And does the person that typed this up, did that person have a duty to accurately record the circumstances of that meeting and the concerns that were addressed in that memo?
Yeah.
Thank you. Calls for speculation unless this doctor happens to know who typed it up and under what circumstances this.
Are you aware of that, Doctor?
Yes.
Then the objection's overruled.
And is this along with your notes, along with your diagrams, along with your report? Is it part of the official coroner's file in the case where the decedent is identified as Lana Clarkson?
Yes.
And does it bear the identification number of the deceased's case, this particular document?
Yes.
What identification number does it bear?
03-00937.
Which is the previously testified to identification number specific to Lana Clarkson. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Propose to put it up. Ask questions.
Okay.
Thank you. We could have this Exhibit MM, Dr. Pena is now on the board, and it addresses a number of concerns that resulted from some previous meetings. Would that be correct, Dr. Pena?
Yes.
Okay, I want to go through them first of all. The first people at the meeting were Mr. Dixon, another deputy DA, along with yourself and Dr. Lakshman. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and let's go for number one. the first bullet point that's in the meeting, and I'll just ask you some general questions, and sure that this is not a complete memo, but I wanted to have you look at this and then tell us what the concerns were and what your role was in identifying and correcting these concerns if you were able to do that. So the first one had to do with some tooth fragments from the crime scene that were recovered by the sheriff, and they were given to Steve Dallin, an odontologist, and there was some problems regarding that. What were the problems that were raised regarding those tooth fragments?
At the death scene, there were 3 vials that were collected. A couple of those that I had found, and one from someone else. Again, they were put in 3 vials. One of those 3 vials, we examined those with the dentist odontologist around middle of February, early February. There were 2 times, February, I believe, 7th and February 13th, to review the tooth fragments because they were reconstructing basically for Ms. Clarkson's mouth from her original dental records to identify that those porcelain fragments found at the scene were indeed hers. So what happened is that on review, on the second time I met with the odontologist, one of those times, he admitted later to a letter to Dr. Lakshman and the chief medical examiner that he broke one of the vials, and my back was turned. I did not know it at the time, and the tooth was lost. It flew around the room somewhere, and it never could be found. But he didn't tell us till months had passed. But I found out actually at the end, I believe, of March of 2003. I received a call from Mr. Steve Dow, who informed me that the vial was broken, but I'd already sealed it. And that's basically what happened. But what happened is I had sealed that. I had all the fragments put in the separate envelopes, and I went ahead and sealed them. But what wasn't never relayed to me from the dentist who actually broke it, when my back was turned, he somehow took it out of there without telling me, cracked the vial, panicked. That's the word he used. Stuffed it back in and got scared because he knew he lost the tooth. He didn't tell me again. I went ahead and sealed it because I already looked at it knowing that the tooth fragments were there. And it was only one of the 3 that were broken. And that's what happened.
Okay.
But it came up to me
So it was a magic tooth that flew around the room.
about a month later, and then we were all trying to figure out what happened to the tooth.
Okay, so Dr. Pena, let me ask some foundational questions regarding the teeth. You had talked yesterday about the fact that you noticed that there were some missing front incisors from Lana Clarkson, and you felt that might be something that was important to look for at the scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you testified that you actually searched and found them. Is that correct?
Some of them, yes.
Okay, and where were they located? If you could tell the jury where they were located in relationship to where Lana Clarkson was.
Ms. Clarkson in the foyer of the rear entrance. On the red carpet in front of her were a couple of pieces, if I recall correctly. Then right adjacent to that is a stair case that goes up to a second level, and there were some located on that area too, on a red carpet, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Were there some on the stairs also, actually midway up the stairs?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so basically, if I'm picturing this correctly, the gun is fired in her mouth, and the gun recoils, and it knocks her front teeth out, essentially. Is that correct? And they break apart?
Yes.
And basically, her teeth were not natural. They were acrylic because she had some restoration dental work done. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the sight of the gun, where you aim the gun, it has some notches on it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we've got some pictures we'll look at a later time, but basically when the recoil occurred, it caught those 2 teeth, broke those 2 teeth, and then they went flying either towards the wall to the stairs or even up on the stairs, some of the fragments.
Correct.
Okay, now, when you went to the scene and did the things that you did you have occasion to have to check in some way to the scene?
Yes.
And what was the procedure that law enforcement was using to do that? In other words, to check in and document the fact that you had gotten to the scene?
I bring my ID badge, official LA County Coroner's badge, and a metallic badge with me with a number on it. That number is unique to myself as an LA County employee. I log in on the log sheet because it goes in sequential order, who's first, second, et cetera. I don't know, I can't remember what number I was on the log sheet, but I put my name, my title, where I'm employed, and my ID number on that and the time I enter.
Okay, so when you go to a death scene that's being investigated where law enforcement is involved, they actually have a log, and you have to sign that log once you go in because they want to track how many people go in and what they do, correct?
Yes.
Okay, could we have next in order exhibit, the next in
Double N.
double N, which purports to be the log, and I will show it to council. Before we put it up on the screen, Dr. Pena, I'm showing you a document that's marked double N. If you take a look at it and tell me if you recognize it's like is that basically everybody signs in, and then when you get there, you put your ID number and your date and time. And I want to ask that it be that this is a multi-page document and that we go to page 3. And if you could, excuse me, page 4. Excuse me, page 4. And does page 4 anywhere show your initials and name and so forth?
Yes.
Okay, and what time does it document? And you actually fill that in with your own handwriting, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it has your ID number and then it has your name and the time that you went in, is that correct?
Yes.
And then 1775 would be the time you went in, and the time you left was 1934, is that correct?
Yes.
So you were there for that period of time because you had to sign out once you signed, after you signed in, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and this particular document, you were like there were hundreds of people that went into this scene, some of them before you, is that correct?
Yes.
When you were there, when you first went into this particular scene and observed the decedent and did the search that you did regarding these tooth fragments and so forth that we were talking about, were there any other around the scene and criminalists?
Yes.
Okay, and what were they doing? What did you observe them doing when you first went in?
They had the little yellow, I call them number tags over the evidentiary items that they think are possible value for case, and had a number of them on the carpet, I noticed. And they weren't quite sure of some on the stairs, I remember. And I was asked to look at some of them on the stairs.
Okay.
And basically that was it, outside of the body.
Okay, outside of the body then. So one of the things that you focused your attention on, and if we could have exhibit M back, MM, excuse me, is that you were looking for these tooth fragments, correct?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion, Dr. Pena, that when the gun was fired inside the decedent's mouth, that caused these teeth to be ejected out of the mouth in some way?
Yes.
Okay, and you know that because the stippling or the cuts on the outside of the lips tell you that. Is that true?
It's actually called pseudo-stippling.
Pseudo-stippling.
That's correct.
Okay, and they actually caused these little cuts so that you knew the teeth were forcibly ejected, and they caused damage to the inside of the lips and then continued onward for some distance. Is that correct?
Yes.
And all of the tooth fragments were basically in one direction. In other words, there were some at the wall, the base of the wall where the stairs were, then there were some on the stairs sort of above in that same general direction, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so it was your view that the teeth particles flew out. Some of them went farther than others, but they were all basically going in a similar direction. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all based upon the recoil of the weapon. Is that true?
Yes.
And what the odontologists were trying to do is to piece together the teeth to see if all of them were there. Is that accurate?
Most of them, yes.
Now, you also talked about looking for this acrylic nail, this portion of that nail. And tell us what you did to search for that particular item. Where did you look? Did you talk to other investigators to also look for it? What was your search for that?
Well, my role, along with investigator Barbara Nelson, investigator coroner criminalist Lintemoot, and the senior coroner criminalist, Mr. Dan Anderson, We looked in the immediate area. First, we started with her clothing, because she was wearing black, everything, black jacket, black slip on, and black, I think, stockings. But we looked immediately around her area on her clothing. And I myself could not find anything, and same with my colleagues. We then proceeded just the immediate adjacent floor area, what we could do at that time, and couldn't find anything. But that's just in the immediate area, because all the other areas were really tagged or marked off, and we didn't want to compromise anything further, so we stayed within our realm.
Okay, so you looked just around the body, essentially.
Yes.
And did you alert the criminalists and the investigators from the sheriff's department to be on the lookout, so to speak, for this nail?
Yes.
When I say nail, I'm referring to an artificial acrylic nail as opposed to a human fingernail.
That's correct.
Okay. And, okay, so getting back to this memo here that talks about the tooth fragments and so forth, these vials, did they just have tooth particles in it, or did they have other items in it also that were collected along with them?
If I recall correctly, one of the vials had some wood fragments in it, like
Okay.
slivers of wood.
Okay, and little particles of other unknown items, is that correct?
I can't remember that.
Okay. All right, let's go to the second bullet point here that was discussed in this memo, and I want to ask you some questions about that. The second bullet point talks about the criminalists and the smears and blood spatter that wasn't described, and they're referring to a coroner criminalist. Do you know who that was?
Yes.
Who was that?
That's Miss Jamie Lindemuth.
Okay. Now, it says that 3 swabs were collected from the wrist. Do you know what that process is to collect swabs?
To be honest with you, no, I don't. I know she did it, but I don't recall. I might have my head turned.
Okay. In general, do you know what it's meant when somebody says they collect swabs?
Yes, it's just as an example. I'm not sure what she's using, but it's like the Q-tips you buy at the store in general, and you'll just swab the, and in this case, there was Clarkson, and that's what she was swabbing.
Okay. And if we could go to the next bullet point. And it talks about where you don't describe or mention any blood spatter on the hands and the photos don't show the same. What was the issue that was concerned at that particular time at that?
I don't recall specifically. I know the photographs did not come out well, and they didn't show anything, and I didn't expect them to, because I'm looking again for abundant stains, particularly on the fingers, on the shooter's hand, if possible. And on the top part, by your knuckle regions, there'll be a lot of big droplets of blood. That's what my eyes train in. That's a gross finding I can see with my eyes.
Okay. This was on the decedent's hands that this was being discussed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. It had nothing to do with, you weren't asked to give an opinion about somebody else's hands, were you?
No.
Okay. Did you see any pictures of anybody else's hands?
No.
It says Dr. Pena did not describe or mention any blood spatter on the hands, and photos did not show the same. Was that referring to the decedent?
Yes.
Okay. And was that discussed at this meeting?
I can't recall that. I'd have to look at the notes.
Okay. Well, this is a type note of that meeting, and it has a bullet point. Dr. Pena did not describe or mention any blood spatter on hands, and photos don't show the same. Do you remember what the discussion was regarding that?
I do not offhand at this moment, no.
Okay, there was something discussed regarding that, though you just don't remember the detail?
Right, yeah.
Okay. And then the next bullet point was a tape lift that the coroner criminalist used to collect a hair sample, and then it compounded blood spatter evaluation. Do you know did that have anything to do with your role in this case?
No.
You were actually present, were you not, when the decedent was brought to the coroner's office, and basically her clothing was removed and it was evaluated at some point there, and then also eventually sent to the sheriff's department. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you actually described the evaluation of the clothing in your final autopsy report. Is that true?
That's correct.
This would be the one that was signed on September 19th, 2003. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you look at the clothing and evaluate the decedent's clothing for blood spatter?
I don't use the term blood spatter. I just say blood stains in general and hopefully put the location down. That's what I usually do.
Did various articles of her clothing that she was wearing have blood stains on them, using your term?
Yes.
Was there a lot of blood staining on her clothing?
I noticed she was wearing a black jacket. On the right side in particular, had a lot of blood stains on it. She had a slip-on that had blood stains on the front part of it. And some of her stockings I noticed had blood stains, if I recall correctly. I didn't notice anything on the left side of her jacket. This is prior to removal. I don't want to get you confused, the jurors. Her shoes, I didn't notice anything on. And in her she had like a leopard purse. There were some blood stains that were running down there, I noticed. I'm just using the term loosely running, just to be descriptive wise, and into the purse itself or around it, if I recall correctly. And I don't know if anyone in the purse, that's beyond me, and someone else can comment on that.
Okay. Now, you noted the purse. You talked about the purse yesterday being around her shoulder, kind of a little off her shoulder, basically.
Yeah, getting ready to come off. That's
all right. And you felt that was significant because that indicated to you that this wasn't a self-inflicted wound because she had her purse around her shoulder. Is that correct?
Well, that's one factor I consider. That's correct.
Okay, one of the factors. Do you also consider that she wasn't involved in a struggle? Because if she was involved in a struggle, maybe her purse wouldn't be on her shoulder. Was that another consideration you made?
It's hard to make that conclusion.
Okay.
It's difficult.
So your thinking was that she could have had a struggle, but her purse just stayed on her shoulder, notwithstanding?
It could have, yes.
Okay. And she could have done a self-inflicted wound and it could have stayed on her shoulder also. Is that correct?
That's possible, yes.
Okay. Now, you couldn't rule that out, in other words. Is that true?
At that time, no.
Okay. And so when it comes to the purse, did that really sway you one way or the other on either of those issues?
No, just to get in the totality of everything put together on this case and coming to my final conclusions, I find the purse to be significant, being on that shoulder. If the ultimate self-infliction is going to occur, that purse should come off, in my opinion.
Okay. Now, the next bullet point that we talk about, and this is the last one in this particular document, talks about the movement of the body afterwards caused a purge that basically compromised or compounded the evaluation. What does that word mean when you say compounded the evaluation? What does that mean?
That means it made it difficult to evaluate for what the term they're using, blood spatter on the left side, because the jacket was soaking in what we call purge. And let me describe for the jurors what purge is just real briefly. In this case, because she has that oral gunshot wound I described for you yesterday, because of that wound, the blood was still pooling after death because she's supine because we had to move her. And as you know, the heart is not pumping as we described as we went through yesterday, the blood is still pooled in the mouth. So we transport her back to the coroner's office. We have to get the clothes off. She has turned on her skin. Inadvertently, the blood came out of the mouth, mainly from that wound. There's blood still there. And that's called purging. Just like vomiting is coming out of the mouth. And it went down and on the left side of on the sleeves and the buttons, actually, too.
Did you mention anything about the compromising of the jacket in your autopsy report at all?
I did not, no.
Okay, and essentially, do you know where, did you evaluate the jacket before you got to the medical examiner's office?
I looked at it, I did what's called a cursory or brief exam at the scene.
Okay, and was there any blood on the jacket, the sleeves and areas of the jacket?
No, there wasn't.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about you knowing Dr. DeMaio from his publications and so forth. Did you ever meet with him regarding this particular case where he actually came to your office for a period of time?
Yes.
Okay. Did he look at some pathology slides that you had prepared at time of autopsy?
And a number of items, him and Dr. Bodden.
Okay. And Dr. Michael Bodden, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall them looking at these slides that were prepared by your office that were collected at the time that you did the autopsy on Lana Clarkson?
Yes.
And you discussed the case at length with him, or for a period of time at least, that day, is that
I
correct?
did not say anything, actually. I said very little.
Okay. Do you recall at some point later asking for and actually receiving some slides that were collected by Dr. DeMayo and asking that those be sent to your office, to you?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was done recently here, like in April, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you have occasion, and these are, can you tell the juries what these slides are? Just give them an idea what type of evidence they are.
Sure. Those slides, I did not personally examine them, just to let you know. Those were turned over to the LA Sheriff's Department, and that'll be discussed by Dr. Lynn Harold. So when I had them sent to me directly, they were sealed when I received them. I took them over to Dr. Harold at the crime lab, and he took jurisdiction of the packet and photographed it and signed it in. So I had a chain of custody to their crime lab. I never opened it other than taking it myself in my own car to that lab. I did, however, read Dr. Miles' report, though.
Okay, did you read his other reports also?
Yes.
And in testifying, did you take into consideration the points that he made in his reports?
No.
Okay. When you looked at the reports on the slides, did you take into consideration anything that was in that report?
No.
Okay. You just happened, how did you get his report?
It was sent to me as, that came separately, I believe. It was faxed from, I believe, the DA's office. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
They sent you a number of items, materials over the course of this case. Is that true?
Yes.
Did you record or log in when you got those or make a note in your file?
I don't recall, but they're in I have them here with me today.
Okay. And did sent you by the district attorney's office, did you review those?
The actual expressive written report.
I want to take this exhibit down MM, and I want to get to another exhibit, and we would ask that this be marked next in order. It's discovery page 649, and it's a diagram.
00.
Ask that it be put on the board and ask if you recognize double L, Dr. Pena.
00.
Double O, I'm sorry. You recognize what double O is?
Yes.
Okay, and could you tell the jurors what that is as far as your evaluation of this particular case?
This is just another diagram with the number 38 in the left-hand corner of basically a skeletal frontal view, indicating basically the fracturing of the teeth that we went over yesterday. The lower view, you don't have to worry about. There's a little diagram I made of the palate, the hard part of your top of your roof of your mouth. You can touch your tongue to it. That's what's shown at the left-hand corner with I believe a left and right side. I can't see too well from here.
Was this is what we're talking about? The left and right, this little diagram here at the lower
Yes.
left-hand corner?
As seen anatomically, if you're looking at a person viewing them from a front view, and that's what that's showing. It's showing the palate was fractured, much like a bone fracture.
Okay, well, the palate is made of bone.
Well, part of it is.
The hard palate.
Yeah, the hard palate, that's correct.
Okay, so you have the hard palate that's bone, and then there's the soft palate that's non-bone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking at this hard palate. So you diagram, and your reason for creating this particular diagram, focusing just on the lower left corner, is that it was some injury that you noted at time of autopsy. It was a medical finding that you wanted to make sure that was properly observed and documented in your records. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'd like to now move to People's Exhibit number 44.
I'm sorry, but the palate is bone. Don't tell the doctor. When did you become a doctor, dude? Seriously. Seriously. The palate is bone. No, not all of the palate is bone. Dumbass. I'm sorry. It's a medical thing. You guys know how I get with medical things. Don't tell the doctor anatomy. I'm sure he knows it. Idiot.
With this also a diagram. And then we'll get back to this one in a moment. This one was discussed at length with you, by Mr. Jackson yesterday. In particular, you talked about the injuries to the tongue, in particular, the stellite wound and the bruising on the left aspect of the tongue, the bruising on the back of the tongue. And you gave an opinion that this contusion, and basically a contusion is the medical term that you use for bruise, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you gave the opinion that this was consistent with blunt force trauma, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and you would agree that all the injuries to the interoral portion of the mouth are consistent with blunt force trauma as far as the bruising is concerned. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the exception would be the tearing of the skin, and that's actually a wound that there had to be some physical contact with an object. Is that correct?
You mean the tearing of the top of the tongue?
Right. In other words,
that's not skin. That's just a different kind of, we call mucosa.
Right.
But anyway, but it's a little bit tougher, but that's the top of your tongue. That's correct.
Basically, the tongue is a very muscular portion of the body. Is that true? It's all muscle.
That's correct.
Okay. And if somebody has a bruise on their arm, sometimes there's muscle and there's tissue and fat and so forth. And that's different than the tongue. It's all muscle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Much harder to bruise that than regular skin. Is that correct?
Yes.
With subcutaneous or underlying fat and layers and so forth. Is that true?
Compared to the skin with layers, you just mentioned.
Okay. So essentially, when you looked at this particular wound, this wound that basically where the bullet hit the tongue and actually tore the skin, tore the tongue. Is that essentially what happened?
Yes.
Okay, you could see that. You could see features of that. Is that true?
That's correct.
Was that a contact wound?
That's a tough one. It's more of like a loose contact, I call it, because I didn't see any evidence of an impression from the muzzle to that tongue area. But it probably got nicked by the bullet in simple terms.
Okay, that's sort of what I was getting at. The bullet grazed it or nicked it or did something to cause this tearing. And you actually measured the start of the tear 1.5 inches from the tip of the tongue. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this particular weapon that we're talking about has a 2-inch barrel. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would suggest to you that the barrel was basically pretty much fully within the mouth at the time of discharge. Is that true?
That I'm not too good at, but I know it's in the mouth, but I don't know at what point.
Okay. It only could go 2 possible inches into the mouth because that's unless the cylinder was in the mouth also. But basically the whole barrel was 2 inches. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the tongue, you don't know exactly where the tongue was at the time of discharge. Is that true?
That's right.
Okay, but you presume it was behind the teeth because the teeth got blown out. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Now, yesterday you talked about some ballistics testing that was done where a range was given between 2 and 3 inches. And where was the range from that was being measured from?
That I'm not sure of how they do that.
Okay.
Sorry.
In other words, what was your understanding as to where that was? Were you giving an estimate as to where the gun was fired, that it was 2 to 3 inches in the mouth from, like, let's say the lips or some other place, or was it from the back of the throat and the gun was 2 to 3 inches from the back of the throat, or where was the measurement started at?
I don't understand it to be exact. It's a good question. It's basically my understanding from muzzle when that bullet's just leaving out the gun to target, meaning it's going to hit the tissue at what point. And I'm not quite sure how that's done and how they get that measurement. I'm just repeating it.
Okay. The target, what do you mean by that?
That's ultimately where the bullet's going to strike.
Okay. And where did the bullet strike?
Oh, it strikes the tongue, and then it goes on to basically mainly to the back of the throat.
Okay, so was the back of the throat where you measured 2 to 3 inches from the back of the throat, or was it from this object here?
I don't know because I didn't measure it.
Okay, so where does the 2 to 3 inches, where do you measure to and from on that 2 to 3 inch estimate?
I'm going to object at this point, Your Honor. It appears that counsel is asking the wrong witness the question. That's the question for Jim Carroll, the ballistics expert who did the measurements.
Are you able to answer the question? So,
No, I'm not.
all right, the objection sustained.
In your opinion, could the gun have been fired 2 to 3 inches from this particular particular stellite wound on the tongue that was 1.5 inches from the tip of the tongue?
I don't know that.
Okay. 2 inches in front of this stellite wound towards the tip, in other words, north of the tip of the tongue, so to speak, would have been outside of the mouth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so 2 to 3 inches would have been impossible if you're measuring from this wound. Is that correct? Because the teeth were blown out and they wouldn't have been blown out had that been true, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you gave quite a bit of testimony regarding this contusion on the left as being caused during the time period close in time to death. Is that correct?
Yes.
And are you able to say exactly how this occurred? In other words, do you know how this contusion occurred?
I opine it's consistent with blunt force trauma due to the weapon itself.
Okay, meaning the weapon firing or the weapon hitting it?
The weapon hitting it.
Okay, is it possible that that contusion was caused by the firing of the weapon and the exploding gases within the mouth and the resulting trauma that can occur from that?
No, not in my opinion.
Okay, so you disagree that that's not possible at all, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and yesterday you opined that and gave the opinion that, or at least you, when we talked about gases and the forces involved and so forth, you said you're not really that familiar with the pressures that get exerted by a gunshot wound once it goes off in the mouth. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, now if we could go back to the hard palate exhibit, which is 0000. You noted, if we could highlight this left-hand portion, I wanted to ask you a few questions about that. Doctor, were you able to, with reference to the hard palate, which had a fracture, basically a linear fracture all the way up and down it, is that correct? And that was bone?
Yes.
Now, you would agree, would you not, doctor, that it takes a little bit more trauma, force to break bone than it does to cause a bruise. Is that true?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay, to cause a bruise, there has to be a certain amount of force that's necessary. In other words, I can grab your arm and I'm not going to necessarily cause a bruise. Is that true?
That's true.
And it's harder to cause a bruise in a muscle than it is in regular tissue, like an arm that has underlying fat and so forth. Is that true?
In general, yes.
Okay, and you would agree that it takes a little bit more force to break a bone than it does to cause a bruise. Is that true?
That depends on the person itself too, because some people are a little more prone to fractures, the elderly in particular, and even the young sometimes, if they have under mineralization of the bone, the bone's not calcified well, that can happen. It can break or bruise easier for that matter.
Okay, so bones and bruising, those are two separate issues. In other words, people might have something wrong with them where their bones are not as strong and then they would break more easily. Is that true?
Yes.
And then people might have their bones might be fine, but they might bruise more easily because they've got some condition or are taking some medication that might cause a concern with reference to that.
Correct.
Is that correct? So now let's talk about that for a moment. I want to talk first about bones. And you looked at the medical records for Lana Clarkson. You collected some of her medical records. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and what medical records did you collect? If you could just give us sort of a general overview of what they are. And if you need a minute to kind of look at your file, I want to ask you to do that, if that would help you give us an idea as to what you did.
Her medical records, the most recent ones that I had at the time of autopsy within weeks to follow.
You guys, I just got a super, super weird email. Oh, you guys can't see it. No, you can't see it. It's too little. It says, thanks, your funds are now safely in our account. It says invoice at the top. And it is from Idris Nava. IDRISNAVA. Never heard of this person. Don't know what they're talking about. There's an attachment that's a PDF file. I want to open that sucker so bad to find out what this is. But I really don't think I should. This is going to drive me nuts. I know, right, Nancy? Right? I know. There's not even, on emails where there's like, you can block it as junk or whatever. I don't even see the block thing. Well, I can mark it as spam. Okay, I marked it as spam. Okay. All right. I just want to run it by y'all. Okay. All right. Okay. We're in agreement. Good. Okay. Back to the regularly scheduled program. They send me a check, I think, because they don't have like my bank information. And I haven't made enough yet. Because I have to make $100 before they send me anything. Yeah, because curiosity. And they know that. That's how they get people to click on the link. Because my first inclination is like, I don't know you. I didn't send you any money. What the heck are you talking about? And you want to click on the link, right?
After that, in 2003, would be from her own doctor. I don't like to mention names to protect the doctors. I just want to be honest with you.
Why don't you just give us the nature of the doctor, whether he was a type, like a neurologist or a bone doctor? Just give us a general description.
There's an internal medicine doctor who was seeing her at the very end, here in Los Angeles, of course. All are from LA. There was a orthopedic doctor who saw her frequently at the time she had these wrist fractures in 2001 and followed her up to about the period of 2002. There was an OBGYN doctor just for general maintenance checkups. She was seeing a neurologist, as I described yesterday. And general other, looked like internal medicine type doctors, again in LA County. And also an ENT specialist for she has some allergy issues going on and asthma. And so general physicians, internists, again, orthopedic type physicians.
Okay, so you got kind of an overview of some of the medical issues that related to her and what type of treatment she was getting in the years before that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Just by chance, did you happen to get any records from medical professionals that dealt with psychological or therapy type records? Did you get any of those?
I only saw one from 1994.
Okay, and did you get that as part of your investigation in from the coroner's office?
No, that just came in recently from your side about maybe a couple months ago.
Okay, well, we'll park that for a moment, and let me ask you sort of a global or overall question. From your review of the medical records, did you get any information that Lana Clarkson had any problems with the mineralization of her bones, that she had some susceptibility for her bones to break more easily than normal?
No, I did not.
The bone breakage, it was dancing and apparently broke both her wrists a few years back before her death. Is that correct?
Yes, she was dancing, she slipped and fell, basically. That occurred.
Okay, and basically then she was in an auto accident where she rear-ended somebody and re-injured her wrists after that. Is that true?
Actually, they thought she had re-injured it, but she went back to the same orthopedic surgeon. He actually excluded that. She basically strained it, and she lost a little bit of mobility for just a short period of time, but regained it. Was doing quite well with her strength and grip, et cetera, and range of motion after that time.
Basically, at the time of her death, her wrists were pretty much back to normal. Is that correct?
Getting there, yes.
Okay, if not 100% close there too, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you notice anything about her bones that were out of the ordinary as far as their strength and their composition? Like, did she have any type of a disease or condition that would affect the breakage of her bones other than the normal circumstance that one might encounter?
No.
Okay. So now we get to the questions regarding the hard palate and this fracture that goes the entire length of the hard palate. Okay, and the hard palate is on the roof of your mouth, basically?
Yes.
And underneath is the soft palate, is that correct?
Well,
Or
in the back is the soft palate.
back is the soft palate and so forth. And what did you see in the soft tissue there? What did you see?
The X's, the slashes for the jurors, that's where the bullet went through. You could see it tore apart that area. See if that's the soft palate. It started a hard palate, and that's where the fracture starts. So it's kind of a continuation of the injury process that I was. No, it's indirect involvement. It's indirect involvement because it's striking the soft tissue, but it's like a little resonance, like an earthquake in simple terms. And it's continuing from that soft palate into the hard palate, and it's continued on literally to the front part.
Okay, the bullet struck the back of the throat somewhere in an upward direction?
No, it struck the soft tissue in the back of the throat,
Okay.
horizontally.
And this would be, and the muzzle of the gun was 2 to 3 inches from the entrance of the bullet wound. Is that approximately correct, or do you know?
That I don't know.
Okay. And did the explosion of the gases have anything to do with this bone fracture?
In my opinion, no.
Okay. And in your experience, how many intraoral gunshot wounds have you looked at where a man or a woman has pulled the trigger and shot themselves in the mouth?
Maybe a couple hundred times.
Okay. And basically, you see soot and you see bruising and you see the bullet hole, all of these things that were similar to this particular case. Is that correct?
Oh, well, normally in the suicide that we see in our office, the predominant things that the predominant site that we see is the hard or soft palate. The muzzle will actually go up and plant it there. You'll see the actual muzzle imprint, and you'll see the sitting right around. It's like a circle, and you'll see the fracturing of the hard palate. Not linear like that, but a nice little hole, and then it goes upward, of course. But we do see them horizontal too, but it can occur both ways.
Okay. In other words, you see more injury to the hard palate typically?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Now, in this particular case, do you know whether or not the gun was resting on the tongue when it was fired or not?
I don't know that.
Okay. You're saying it could have been, and could the gun have been resting on the teeth and the tongue?
I don't know that.
And yesterday you said that the mouth was somewhat open because the gun had to be in the mouth. Is that true?
Yes.
And is it also correct that, do you know whether the lips were closed around the barrel of the gun?
I don't know that.
But you know that basically when stuff came out of the mouth, it caused a tearing of the lips with this pseudo-stippling. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, let me correct that. Not the lips. The lips are outside. The inner part of your gum line is called the mucosa or buccal mucosa, B-U-C-C-L-A, just so you understand anatomically where we're at. Lips are on the outside. This shot did not affect her lips.
Okay. Now, are you saying, just so that we fully understand your opinion, Dr. Pena, that it's impossible for this fracture to have been caused by just the explosion of the gases themselves, that did not happen, and you can state that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
I'm not saying it's impossible, but just going from my experience with fractures and where the location of that wound was, what I saw, there's a continuity. And I'm not going to say 100% certain, but let's say 99.9% certain that it's from that.
And how certain are you that this contusion on the tongue, the one that's on the left that you talked about, did it have any type of an abrasion to it? In other words, where the top of the skin was disrupted or anything such as that?
Okay, again, the muscle, it's muscle, that tongue, it's not skin. I want to distinguish that for you. You have skin on your hands and your body. The tongue is muscle. It did not have any abrasions that I noted or any imprints.
Okay. And if you could define to the jurors what an abrasion is. Let's say I have an abrasion on my skin. What is that, if you could just give a descriptive term to that?
Sure. You take your own hand, and if you were to strike something, we do this every day, hit something inadvertently, or you fall and scrape your knee, you just denude off the top part. Denude means to rub off the top part of that skin, and you'll see a little redness, and it's kind of confined to an area. We've all done that when you fall on your knees. Well, in a couple of days, that heals completely. And one important thing you notice, it heals completely. There's no scarring. And that is typically what's commonly we see in what's called an abrasion.
Okay. Now, excuse me for misstating the issue regarding the lips, but the lips are the outside, the inside of the lips, you call them mucosa. I want to talk a little bit about the lips themselves. Were they, because of the gas pressures and so forth, did they get torn and bruised up because of the explosion of the gun?
Only from to answer that, no. Only from the pseudo-stippling that I described yesterday.
Okay, but that was caused because the gun came back out and all the gases and so forth caused some stretching of the mouth, is that correct?
No, that was from the fracturing, mainly from the recoil that fractured the porcelain crowns like glass, and it caused it to break and hit the mucosa and bruise it and cut it and tear it. And some of it may be from what you're saying. I can't exclude that. That's a good point, actually.
Okay.
Maybe, but predominantly it's from the shattering of the two front teeth, upper teeth.
Okay, could we have Exhibit 44 placed on the screen again? This is your diagram of the tongue that we talked about. Dr. Pena, were there any abrasions to the lip, the outside of the lip, or tears to the lip or anything such as that?
That's a good question. Let me look at my report out if I may. I'm going to get my copy out. Your Honor, is that all right? Yes. Thanks. Just going to look at something here real quick.
If you could show me what that looks like, Doctor, I'd love to.
Sure.
I can follow along.
And Mr. Jackson, it's diagram 2. Diagram 22, dated from February 4th. This is the time I do the autopsy for the jurors. What I did note here is on the lower lip, but inside, I'll put my lip down like this and move it. So if you look at me,
Inside of the lip?
inside of the lip, I'm pulling the lower lip down. She had a red abrasion, 1/2 by 1/2 inch.
Right. How about the outside of the lips themselves? Just the lips. Did you see, was there any cuts or tears or abrasions?
No, there wasn't.
Okay. And teeth. Were there any chips in the teeth other than the ones that were blown out from the recoil of the gun? Did you see any of the other teeth that were chipped or broken or anything such as that?
No.
Okay. And this particular contusion, if somebody's tongue was in their mouth in its natural resting position, would this contusion be near some of the teeth?
Yes, it would.
Okay. And has it ever been your experience, doctor, in all your many cases that you have looked at interoral gunshot wounds that were self-inflicted, that the tongue would, when the bullet explodes, it would cause the tongue to basically smash up against the teeth and cause a contusion? Do you ever see that in any of your cases?
Not that I can recall, because when that occurs, it's usually the gun has been placed what's called submental. And usually it could be a regular handgun. A lot of men like to use the shotgun and put it up there and cause a devastating wound to the tongue. It'll hit the tongue and split it, but it's all tearing to get in laceration, just like you see here. But you don't see bruising because that tongue is so ripped apart, so it's even harder to find. And even with a handgun, I've seen that, but again, it's all lacerations or tearing defects. I rarely ever see bruising that I can remember.
Well, I want to talk just about interoral gunshot wounds for the time period.
Okay.
Okay. Do you ever see bruising that's not associated with the bullet itself?
I haven't, no.
Like in this case, there's a lot of bruising that occurs in the back of the tongue. Is that correct? And basically, were they particles of the bullet that hit that?
Yes, that's a good point. I believe that the bullet struck we know it struck the spinal column in the back after it went through the throat. And when it fractures that column, the bullet starts to get compromised, so it starts to tear apart, literally. And a lot of little stuff came back the other way and was striking the portions of the breathing tube area that you see dotted. And then again, part of the tongue as he's pointing with the laser. And that's what I believe caused a lot of that bruising. But it's superficial. Again, it stayed on the top part of that tongue, what we call mucosa, and had no depth to it because there wasn't enough power to, cause any more trauma deeper in that muscle.
When you talk about depth, sometimes you actually slice the tissue to look at that and do a section. That's what it's called. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you do that with the back of the tongue contusions?
Yes, I did.
Did you do it with the one on the left?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you find when you did that?
The one to the back of the tongue that he's pointing to with the laser earlier, that had no depth to it, or very little, or I would have noted it. The one to the left has a half-inch depth, that's quite significant.
Okay.
And so that's why it's measured in 3 dimensions, because it was worthy to note that at that time.
Now, Dr. Pena, when it comes to your evaluation of bruises, and you talked about some on the hands and so forth, you actually looked at other areas of the body too. Is that true?
Yes.
And when you looked at other areas of the body, did you see any bruises, for example, on the legs, the arms, other portions of Lana Clarkson's body?
Yes.
And how many did you note? Are you able to give us a number that you noted overall or estimate?
Yeah, I refer to my report
Sure.
just real briefly.
And if you could just give us an overall estimate as to the number of bruises.
Okay, to the upper, remember the right arm from yesterday? To the jurors, the right wrist, and actually part of the right near it too, though it wasn't described, there are 2 bruises there. I'm trying to get you the total. So to the right arm completely, there are 4 total bruises. To the left, there are 2 bruises. To the left lower leg, there's 1 bruise. To the right back leg, there are 2 bruises. Not tallying these, by the way, but just locations.
And a number of additional questions.
Okay, and to the right front leg, there are 2 bruises also.
Okay, so total, we're talking maybe a dozen or so throughout her body. Is that on the outside of her body?
Approximately, that's correct.
Okay, I don't want to say that's the exact number, but we're talking about, let me ask you some questions about the medical records that you talked about. Did you note in Lana Clarkson's medical records anything indicating that she had any type of bruising that was not normal for a human being?
The only thing I noted was her own personal summation when she was filling out a questionnaire for seeing her doctor, that she said she does bruise easily.
Okay, we'll get to that eventually, but she actually checks it a couple of times that she has a kind of a bruising problem or something she reported?
Oh, she just states it actually. I'm sorry, not states it, but she writes it out. I don't remember ever seeing a box check. But again, I may be wrong. It's been a while since I looked at those.
Okay, and do you know whether or not she was taking any medications that caused her to bruise more easily than had she not been taking those medications?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, what medication was that? If you could just give us the name of it.
There could be several. One is called acyclovir.
Okay.
I don't know how to spell it. I'm sorry. I'm not a good speller. Actually, some of the other medications, if you look at them carefully, I have to look these up, but all of them can, I won't get into the details, but they can potentially cause bruising. I don't know what the frequency is, but Vicodin, she used regularly. I don't know about the Aleve, to be honest with you. Alcohol, I don't know about chronic use, but no, actually they do tend to bruise easily. People that are alcoholics, that's right. Chronic alcoholics will.
From her history, she had some issues regarding alcohol, right?
Well, not recently. She toned down that. I would consider her. She considered herself a social drinker by her history when they were doing her intake, meaning by her doctor. But again, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
But that can be a factor, and that's all I can tell you. Is I'm not real up on that.
Okay, but she was taking some medications, and you gave us the name of the.
Aleve is an anti-inflammatory. It is like, it's like ibuprofen, but it's more of like, it's kind of like a timed release thing. You take 2 in the morning and then it kind of lasts you all day. Acyclovir is an antiviral. I don't know why she was on acyclovir. I don't know that it causes bruising. Oh, it might. But the thing about medications that cause bruising, there still has to be a cause for the bruise. Like, you don't just get a bruise. You have to have something that makes the bruise. Like, something that hits you, it might not bruise if you're not taking that medicine. But if you're taking that medicine, it's going to bruise you. Like a lighter tap that might not have bruised you will bruise you on these medicines. But you still have to get hit or fall or whatever. You still have to have a mechanism that caused the bruising. It's not like you just get a spontaneous bruise from taking a leaf. Yeah, a leaf is amazing, but I'm on a prescription anti-inflammatory, so I can't take it anymore. And there are days that I want to take it because I'm like, really? Is it really going to hurt me if I take that with my prescription anti-inflammatory? Right. Right. So they're kind of making it sound like, oh, you'll just get a spontaneous bruise because you're on these medicines, and that's not how that works.
That medication in particular was one that would cause bruising, to use your words.
Yes.
Okay. And did you see, let's just kind of go from head to toe, starting at the toes, moving upwards, these bruises that are on her legs. You describe a number of them. Is that correct?
Yes.
In general, would you say that they were in different or varying stages of healing in general, using that term in general?
Well, all I can tell you is based on, because I didn't cut in all of these when I look under the microscope, but all I can tell you based on color, and what we use as medical examiners are two terms. Well, there can be a more recent one, and the colors can be range from purple, red, I've seen green being very recent, to the extreme where it's yellow, and pretty much they're healing at that point. So you've got red, purple, and green as being recent, yellow, the extreme, being healing or old.
Okay, so with the exception of yellow, everything is recent. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so when you used that term yesterday, recent, you were including all the different colors that you just described. Is that true?
That's correct.
Let me ask you sort of a foundational question, Dr. Pena, and I'm sure that this comes up occasionally in the type of work that you do. Has there been any type of medical studies where bruises can be timed? In other words, you can know that a bruise is a day old or 2 days old versus an hour old or a minute old or anything such as that?
There have been.
Okay, and would it be fair to state that basically when you say recent, you're talking anywhere from minutes to 2 days old? In other words, you just really can't pin it down to a time period.
Depending on what book you read, it goes from 0, which means the time that it occurred, to 4 hours, to 6 hours. I've seen some go out to 24 hours. These are different literature articles you'll read. So it jumps around quite a bit. There's no consistency to it.
Okay.
But what I gather from this is that you can't pinpoint in time and say, oh yeah, this happened within 12 hours. Again, you have to put the totality of what happened. These are good factors to point out, as Mr. Plort is doing, because again, it gives you an idea in your own mind once you put the totality of what happened here. And like I alluded to yesterday about being restrained, could this all happen at the same time? It's good to think about all that. We know they're not way out old. I wouldn't say days, but maybe a day. That'd be fair.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Is there any medical science that tells us how to date bruises? Is there some study where they've been looking at this issue for years, haven't they?
Oh, yes.
And doctors discuss it all the time. Is that true?
Yes.
And when they talk about this range, something being recent, 0 to 24 hours, depending upon which study you might read, there's some of them that actually say 2 days. Is that correct? 48 hours.
Well, that depends on the type of cells they're seeing under the microscope. But that's a tough one, yeah.
Okay. But in any event, these ranges, anywhere like a bruise, you might look at it and it might be purple and it might be a minute old or it might be 24 hours old. You really can't pin it down. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And when they do these studies, they do them with people that don't have any bruising problems. Is that true?
Well, that they don't know, because a lot of times we don't know the medical histories of the people that have died that come in.
But the studies,
difficult.
they kind of document who the people are. It's a controlled study where they take a medical history and then they give these ranges. Isn't that true?
Well, they try to get a history. That's correct.
Right. So I want to talk about the medical studies, not something that you observe on a regular basis in the work that you do as a forensic pathologist. These studies that they've tried to pin this bruising down and they get this variability, basically recent, they try to exclude people that have problems in the study so they could sort of get a normal or a range within normal. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay. And they've actually been studying this since the 1950s, over well over 50 years. Is that correct?
Yes,
There's wide disagreement on all of these issues. Isn't that correct?
yes,
But these studies focus on people in general who have no bruising problem. Isn't that correct?
yes,
Okay. And that would be different than Ms. Clarkson's condition based upon her own report of her history, as well as the fact that she was on medication that causes bruising. Isn't that true?
that's not necessarily correct.
Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the bruises on the legs. Did you make observations that they look different or had different characteristics to them?
Only by color.
Okay. And when you say color, some of them were yellowish or brownish, and those indicated they were historical. Is that correct?
Again, older and purple. I use that other term, color. I'm sorry, that other term is a color to mean recent.
Okay. So just so that we're clear, I want to understand what you mean when you use the term recent. Are you saying that that's an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, or you're just not making a judgment as to that?
I'm not going to make a judgment.
Okay. And when you look at a bruise and you look at another bruise, can you tell which one came first?
No,
Can you tell whether one's an hour, 4 hours, 12 hours old?
no,
Can you tell if one is 1 hour, 2 hours, 12 or 24 hours old?
no,
Can you tell whether one was made at the same time versus another,
no,
even if they look exactly the same?
no.
That's impossible, is it not?
At this time,
There's no science that would tell you that, correct?
that's correct.
Doesn't matter what you do.
At this time, that's
There's no
correct.
test to run that would tell you that.
That's correct.
I want to ask you a little bit more and some follow-up questions regarding this acrylic nail that you searched for. Do you know whether the people that were at the scene, the criminalists, looked for the nail at other areas other than the area around the body?
My understanding was yes.
Okay, and who is it that did that, if you know?
I don't know.
Okay, do you know what department or agency they work for?
It'd be the LA Sheriff Crime Lab.
Do you remember talking to those individuals?
No,
Do you know how they were alerted to the fact that the nail, the acrylic?
Well, yes and no. Bruising to the area stops, but what is there is there. But when the blood stops flowing, if the person remains in the same position for a while, the blood pools in that position, and that is called, dang it, I forgot what it's called. Anyway, so like if they're on their back for a while, when they get turned over, all the blood is pooled in the back, so their whole back of their body will look like one big bruise because the blood is not circulating. So gravity takes over, and it goes to whatever part is lowest. So, like for instance, if they were sitting in a chair, then their legs would look bruised. If they were on their stomach, the front part of their body would look bruised. On their back, the back part would look bruised. But I'm pretty sure, because when you bruise, the blood goes into the surrounding tissues. So I'm pretty sure those bruises stay. They don't get worse. They don't get better. They just stay because the blood isn't circulating anymore. The reason why a bruise changes color is because that old blood that's in the tissues is getting replaced by good new tissue, and the old lividity. Thank you. Lividity. That's the word I was looking for. So the bruises don't really heal because the blood isn't circulating anymore, but you get that lividity from where they're laid out or whatever. I don't know what time, Nancy. I'm going to set it, when I do the thumbnail, I'm going to set it for 2:00 My appointment's at 12:45, so I should be back by then. Might be earlier than that.
Nail was missing?
I would have told them.
Okay. Now, if we could have a picture of the hand with the broken nail. I don't know if we've marked this as an exhibit. I thought we had either at this hearing or another hearing. Do we have this marked next in order?
Double P.
This particle of nail that's broken on exhibit PP, you see that here, Doctor? Basically with the, first of all, this exhibit PP is taken at the medical examiner's office, is that correct?
Yes,
And you know that by the ruler, is that true?
that's correct.
Okay, and this is when the body was there, and basically the first thing that happens when you, after you go to the death scene and the body is eventually removed, you take it to the medical examiner's office, and then basically there's a bag that you look at the body, you photograph it before it's unclothed, and then you take photographs as you proceed through the procedure.
Clothing?
Right, in the body bag, correct?
Yes,
Then you take a picture once it's open, then you take a picture as you remove it. In other words, it's photo documented at each stage of the procedures. Is that correct?
yes,
And then eventually the body is washed.
correct.
Okay, and then you take more pictures. Is that true?
Yes,
Okay. Now, can you tell whether this picture was taken before the body was washed or after?
it's before,
Okay, because you see some blood spatter on one of the fingers. Is that correct?
or blood stains, that's correct.
Okay. You don't know if that's a spatter or a stain or whatever, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And basically, you know that essentially this is the nail that you saw, a little sliver of this, about a 1/4 inch basically of it. And you can actually look at the measurement and see the scale up here. This is a 3-inch ruler. Is that true?
Yes,
So if you kind of compare that with this, it's about a 1/4 inch break of this acrylic. Underlying that is the actual natural nail that I'm pointing to now. Is that true?
yes.
Okay, and did you learn or did you do any type of background work as to where Lana Clarkson got these nails, how long she had been having them or anything such as that?
Objection, also speculation. Also irrelevant.
Okay, did you get any information from any source regarding that?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustain.
Dr. Pena, were you able to conclude when this nail, this acrylic was broken? Were you able to come to any conclusion as to that?
No,
Were you able to tell where this thumb was at the time that the nail was broken? In other words, what position it was in or anything such as that?
no,
Did you see any, well, let me ask you this question. When you look at a body, one of the things that you look for is any evidence that any soot or other debris or residue that's visible from a gunshot is deposited on the body. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay. Sometimes if a hand is near a weapon, sometimes you see actual soot and debris on the hand itself coming from the discharge of a weapon, correct? We
yes.
talked a little bit about that yesterday. I want to ask them other questions. Did you see any of that on that thumb at all?
Not grossly, no.
Okay. Well, did you see it microscopically?
I didn't examine it microscopically.
Okay. So as far as you know, you didn't see any bullet residue, to use that term. Do you know is that a term that's familiar to you?
Yes.
Okay. What is bullet residue as you use that term?
Well, it's technically called gunshot residue, and they're elements. Remember basic high school chemistry, like barium, antimony, and lead? That's what primarily makes up that, what's called a primer residue. It's at the base of the bullet. So it's like when the hammer hits that bullet, it starts a spark to hit the rest of the powder above it, and then that sends the bullet off. That's all I can tell you.
Okay.
Basically, that's what they're looking at, or looking for.
That's a chemical residue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to talk about stuff that's visible, like soot and stuff that looks black. Like you saw a lot of that in Miss Clarkson's mouth, the inside of her mouth, correct?
Actually, I just saw it on the palate part of her mouth.
Okay. And was there some embedded in her tongue?
That came later. That's correct. There was.
Okay. But as far as the hand is concerned, the hand itself, did you see any soot, black stuff on any of her fingers?
No.
How about her thumb?
No.
How about the non-broken part underlying this acrylic that's broken? Did you see any of it on the edges of her thumb?
No.
Did you see any evidence that there was any black or marks or burns on her thumb?
No.
Let me ask you this question. If you, let's say that this acrylic was broken because the bullet struck the acrylic and broke it. Let's hypothetically say that that happened. Would you expect to see something that's left there that would be evidence of the bullet, or?
Objection foundation.
Overruled. He may ask if he's able to. You're able to offer an opinion on that?
No.
Okay.
Well, in that case, the objection sustained.
Dr. Pena, when you look at a nail and, well, did you see any breakage of the nail itself?
Well.
Not the acrylic, the underlying natural nail.
Okay, good. No.
Okay. When you look at a hand and where somebody's been shot, do you look at the hand to see if there's any injury to the hand that could be associated with a weapon, a gun?
Yes.
Okay, what do you look at in general?
And for the jurors, what I look for is powder. You can see it grossly. Our office, if they come in and they've been manipulated a little bit, I've rarely seen it, but sometimes we do see it on the inner part of the shooting hand, whether it be left or right-handed. Most people are right-handed. The other thing I look for are little pinch marks in the webbing between the first and second digits, your thumb and your index finger. Sometimes you can see that. Rare, but we've seen a few, but you have to look. Those are the main things that I look for, and also the palms to see if there's any soot on there, and that's basically it.
Okay. Now the palms where you look for soot, you look for soot because sometimes people that are involved in struggles with guns, they grab the gun and soot gets deposited on the palms of their hands or even burns. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to show you another generic picture of a gun that shows what type of energy comes in a revolver when it's fired.
Before you do that, I have another case I need to call, and it's also time for our morning recess. Ladies and gentlemen, keeping in mind the admonition, will be in recess for about 15 minutes. Thank you.
He's working on another case while he's doing that one.
Talking about injuries to somebody's hands that are the direct result of their being in the near a gun when that gun is fired. And we've talked about the sooting and so forth, but I want to now get away from that and talk about physical injuries like burns or marks, and you talked about some of those from a weapon that are distinct to a weapon being fired. When a person, and we'll kind of limit this to, well, let me ask you this question. There's two types of weapons that you encounter in general as far as handguns are concerned. One is a revolver and the other is an automatic. Is that correct?
Yes.
This case involves a revolver. Is that true?
Yes.
And you look for different things when there's a revolver as opposed to an automatic. Some things you look at are the same, but some are different. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so both guns have a barrel, have a muzzle. You look, they're the same, but a revolver, the bullets spin around before they're fired. Is that correct?
Yes, just keep in mind, Mr. Plurt, I'm not real good with weapons in general. I just need to let you know that.
Yeah, I understand that, Doctor, and I'm not suggesting that or criticizing you for that at all. I'm just, but you are familiar with injuries from weapons that are on bodies. That's sort of where the rubber meets the road as far as your expertise is concerned. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so you've learned over the years, both by education, reading books like Dr. DeMaio's book, Dr. Spitz's book that you referred to yesterday, about injuries to people's bodies from guns. Is that correct?
Well, actually, at the beginning in training, those books are great books. However, you got to keep in mind, we're working in a big county, LA County, where we do like 10,000 cases a year. And by this time in my life, and as I'm 11 years out now, a lot of it now is experience on my own. Those books are great. I do refer to them at times, but now I'm accumulating data in my own mind, what I've seen from personal experience. So it's really tremendous.
Okay, but just in general, you look for injuries to various areas of the body from guns. In other words, not just the bullet hole, so to speak. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and one of the things you look at with reference to revolvers is whether or not there's any burning on somebody's hands as a result of them being near a revolver. Is that correct?
If you can, correct.
Okay, now I want to show a picture which is a generic picture of a revolver, and I want to ask you a question about that, and we'd ask that this be marked next in order, Your Honor, and it would be just a demonstrative piece of evidence regarding the shooting of a revolver, a high-speed photograph.
Double Q.
Double Q. And you recognize this, Doctor, as a picture of a gun that's being fired as opposed to otherwise. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this is these type of pictures you've seen in your textbooks and so forth. Is that in general? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So again, this is a different picture than we used yesterday, but this shows the pressures and all the stuff coming out of the gun, the gases and the fire that comes out of a gun. And it also shows some flame near that cylinder gap. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And sometimes in the work that you do, you look to see whether or not somebody's hand was at or near that cylinder gap and may have gotten burned or scorched, or soot was deposited as a result of their hand being near a cylinder gap. Is that true?
Yes.
And you've seen that sometimes where somebody is fighting over a gun and it discharges.
I haven't seen it too many times, actually, to be honest with you.
Okay. But what we're talking about is the injury that gets produced from this area of the gun here, the cylinder gap area. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And did you see on the palms of Miss Clarkson's hands, did you see any injury to the palms of her hands that showed any type of either debris from a gun or burning from a gun or anything such as that?
No.
Okay. Now, the next picture I'd like to show is next in order, Your Honor, is actually a picture of the gun involved in this particular case, and that would be
Double R.
Double R. Thank you, Your Honor. Double R, and that's this picture. Okay. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay, 38 caliber Colt, I believe.
Is that right? I don't know.
Okay. Did you ever see the gun that was at the scene?
Yes.
Okay, where was it when you saw it, Dr. Pena?
It's underneath of Miss Clarkson left foot behind it.
Okay. And did it look anywhere similar to this exhibit RR?
I'd have to look at the at-scene photos. It could be, but again, I'd have to correlate. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we could have a stipulation that this is the gun. Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you'll accept that stipulation, and what do you want stipulation to be, Mr. Clark?
That this is the gun that was found at the scene, 38 caliber that was collected.
All right, you'll accept that as a proven fact, ladies and gentlemen.
So what that means, Doctor, is that basically this has been agreed that this is the gun that you saw at the scene. It's the same weapon, just photographed at a different time.
Okay.
Okay, 38 caliber and Colt Cobra. And I believe we talked initially yesterday with regarding Miss Nelson. She filled out a data sheet regarding this gun.
Okay, yes.
Would that help you refresh your memory as to that?
No, it's okay.
Okay. But in any event, with this is it has a 2-inch barrel. Do you remember generally it having a very short barrel?
Yes.
Okay, even though you didn't measure it. And what is this area here that I'm pointing to now on the top of the barrel, what is that referred to as?
I don't recall the name.
Is that like the sighting, like a sight?
I'm sorry,
Is that where you have something to do with aiming the gun?
I don't know.
Okay, and this would be the hammer that basically causes the bullet to fire when it's pulled back and then released?
Yes,
Okay, and then obviously the trigger, is that correct?
yes.
Okay, and we talked about this. In fact, you talked about Lynn Harold giving you some opinions regarding this gun and how it was handled and so forth. Do you remember that? This is the weapon we were talking about?
That's correct.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you some questions about this particular object that's on the top of the barrel and ask you whether or not that had anything to do with the teeth being dislodged from Miss Clarkson's mouth.
Yes,
Okay. Now, did you actually rely on what somebody else told you about that?
I did.
Okay, and who did you rely on that told you that information? What person or persons?
I'm trying to recall, I believe it's Mr., I may be wrong, but I believe it's Mr. Steve Renteria.
Okay.
Don't ask me to spell it, I'm sorry.
Okay. Want to show you an enlargement picture next in order, which would be
The next would be double S.
double S, of an enlargement of that area of the gun that's on the top of the barrel. Oh, 3.317. Okay, and was it your understanding, Doctor, that when they looked at the ridges that are on this item on top of the gun, that they actually saw some material on it that was consistent with the teeth of Lana Clarkson, the dental restorations of the teeth?
That's correct.
About midway, it was actually, there were some still embedded on the gun itself.
Yes, I remember that now, yes.
Okay, and you had, there was quite a discussion, because that really proved that the gun was well within the mouth at the time it was discharged, isn't that correct?
Or was in the mouth, that's correct.
Okay, in front, or, excuse me, behind the teeth, the two top teeth for sure, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you don't know whether it was an inch inside before it struck this particular portion of the gun, or an inch and a half, or whatever the case might be, is that correct?
Yes,
Now, essentially, what you were told and what you relied on is that these particles, which were not natural tooth, is that correct?
I don't recall that, but I think you're right, that's correct.
You may have mentioned that her teeth were acrylic, is that, did you say that?
The correct term is porcelain. I don't know how else to say it, like glass, but
Okay.
the specialized prosthetic type teeth.
Okay. And artificial teeth restoration material that was porcelain in nature, and they actually, when you found these items, that's what you were finding at the scene, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, now I want to show another photograph. TT would be the next one.
Correct.
And this is another close-up photograph from a different view of what SS is. And this would be what it looked like from a top view that this was looked at, and you discussed this with various people regarding this, the odontologist, the criminalist that actually looked at these particles that were essentially molded into this weapon, this gun. Is that true?
Yes.
And they took this and they looked at it under the microscope. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Okay, now if we could look at scan 10168 and ask that this be marked UU, Your Honor.
So marked.
And this is some of the particles that we're talking about from one of the vials. Is that correct?
Yes.
Exhibit UU, and you can see that this is your medical examiner ruler. Is that true?
Yes.
And it looks like it has the date of 2703. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And was that the date that you and the odontologist were looking at these vials of tooth material or restoration tooth material?
Yes.
And you were looking at that to see if they had any connection with this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was the object or the point that you were trying to determine when you were looking at this tooth material?
That those indeed are Ms. Clarkson's recent prosthetic work that she had on the two upper central incisors that I knew about.
Okay, and why was that important?
That it's not someone else's, that it's hers.
Okay. And again, we've talked about where they were found and so forth. We've already described that. If we could go back to Exhibit TT. Now, were there other portions of the tooth that were not near the stairs and on the stairs, like on her body?
I only can remember one piece on the front part of her dress on her abdomen that I described yesterday that Miss Linton actually collected.
Okay. And were there any parts that were missing, if you know?
Only the one that file that I told you that eventually got lost.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Getting back to the exhibit that shows the particles again, and that would be Exhibit UU. After you looked at these, was there an investigation that you wanted to have done as to whether or not any of these particles that were collected had what was called bullet wipe on them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't recall specifically, but I remember requesting someone check just in general terms for sooting or gunpowder, basically, in my simple mind working on the teeth. That's all I remember.
Now, you knew it for that to be done.
No, the autopsy on the 4th, you notice the date there, these are examined on the 7th.
Right.
It was February 4th when I did the autopsy. That's when I knew it was basically the intraoral gunshot wound.
Okay, so you were looking for bullet wipe on these teeth?
However you want to say it. I mean, I say it as powder, but I don't, anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'm not really good at these terms.
Okay, what is the material that would be on an object, whether it's a tooth or something else, if a bullet comes near it and transfers some portion of the bullet to the object? What do you call that?
It'd be like grease and have gunpowder, simple terms. That's all I.
Simple terms, it's been referred to in some of the notes in the coroner's file as bullet wipe.
Okay.
Is that something
It's similar.
Okay. And in the coroner's file, when they use that term, do you have an understanding as to what that term means?
Well, yes, my understanding, when I use it, it applies mainly to clothing, because a bullet's shot from a distance. When I've seen it, mainly you see it on clothing, like my shirt I have here, it goes through it. Hopefully not me, but you see a ring, and you'll see the grease mark. It's a nice, real concentric ring. You see this grayish debris, and you might think it's sooting, and you think it's a close range fire, but actually it's not. And it's a distant wound, so you have to be real careful. That's looking at the clothing. You can also see it on the skin sometimes, and that's what we refer to as a bullet wipe. It doesn't imply a close distant range. You got to be careful with that term.
Okay, but it does indicate that a bullet came in close proximity to an object or clothing or skin or something like that.
Oh, it can. That's one version.
Okay, and what was the result of that when you looked at all these particles? Did you see any bullet wipe on any of them?
I don't recall what the final examination. I'm sorry.
All right. Going to get another exhibit here ready to go, Dr. I apologize for the delay. But I want to focus your attention on Ms. Lintemuth, the criminalist that we've talked about a little bit.
Yes.
And does she ever prepare informational reports similar to the ones that were done by Ms. Nelson for your review and consideration before the autopsy is done?
Well, before the autopsy is completely finalized, I'll get a report from her, in this case, Ms. Lintemuth, which comes on a form, I believe might have a 13 on it.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find my own copy for you, too.
Discovery page 664, 81, would that be the number?
Let's see, I have, is it a number 13 in the left-hand corner?
I have an 81. I'll show my copy. See, that's
Yes.
showing you a document that has a number 81 at the top corner.
Oh, perfect. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, thanks.
We'd ask that this be marked next in order 664. And before it's put on the screen, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about this document, Dr. Pena.
Double V.
Double V. And Dr. Pena, is Exhibit Double V, is it another one of those records that is part of the business record of the coroner's office that's filled out by a criminalist by the name of Jamie Lintemuth?
Yes.
And does she record this information contemporaneous with her work in collecting evidence, in this case, for your review and before autopsy is done?
Yes.
And how is this stuff utilized for your work in preparation of doing an autopsy?
What she uses is form for two different times at the scene. There's a box of things that she'll collect at the scene. And also at the Forensic Science Center, when the body came back, she continued her collection of evidentiary or items that might be of value of evidence later on. So she'll collect all that and package those appropriately and seal them and label them and date them. And they're put in a bindle in the toxicology lab where she mainly works out of. And then they're subsequently collected by the Sheriff's Department for analysis.
Okay, and at the, and it's, again, does she have an obligation to correctly document information on this form, Exhibit VV?
Yes.
We can have it put up on the screen at this point, Your Honor.
All right.
And on the right-hand corner in the top, it basically puts her identification number, what she did, and it's got the form number of 81. Is that correct?
Yes.
Looks like the 81's cut off a little bit, but it's got Lana Clarkson's identification number, the decedent herein.
That's correct.
Okay, and essentially it has the time that certain things were done and what was completed, et cetera. Is that true?
Yes.
Now, at the very bottom of the form is a signature line or a reviewing line by, it looks like yourself. Could you take a look at that portion and tell me what that is there for?
Yes, that just means that I'm aware that these were collected because I was at the scene, number one. And number two, when the body came back to the office that evening of February 3rd, I examined further and watched her swab the different areas. As you see the numbers up there from 1 to 15, I observed all that. And again, was more importantly aware that it was done. And I signed it off on the following day prior to the autopsy, which is part of our job as a medical examiner.
Okay, in other words, the reason you're signing it is because you want to make sure you've known and reviewed this before you even do the autopsy in this case.
Yes.
Okay, and so the bottom line, it gives you the date and time that you had, and that would have been just before the autopsy where you're reviewing information prior to starting the medical autopsy. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now I want to go to the number 2 on the form and ask you if you were aware of that before you did the autopsy in this particular case. The possible blood spatter on the left and right wrist and the fact that various swabs were collected.
I was aware of the swabs collected, but I was not aware of the area, to be honest with you.
Okay. When you reviewed this document, did it cause you to ask questions of Ms. Lintemuth? What did she mean by possible blood spatter on the left and right wrists?
Not at that time, no.
Okay. And you don't remember anything from the previous day at all, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Now, at that point, had the body already been washed, or was that something that hadn't occurred at that point?
At the time that this is being collected, of course, number 2, that's at the scene, so the body is, as it's found, obviously fully clothed and slouched in the chair at that time.
Okay, now I want to move to item number 15, talk about that for a moment.
I'm sorry, which one?
Number 15. And you were aware, though, that basically, at least at that particular time, the nails had already been scraped for foreign material. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there's a box there that says clippings that's not checked. Is that true?
Yes.
What's the difference between taking a scraping, and doing a clipping, if you could explain that?
You know, I cannot. I'll leave that to Ms. Linton. That's beyond my general duties. Thank you.
Okay, and then there's another box that's checked. It's called damaged nail or nails. Is that something different than just scraping them?
That's correct. That's the right thumb from what I can recall.
Okay. Now, if we could move down observations and comments, which is below that last box. Decedent was fully clothed. Long skirt was found inside the decedent's purse, though. See evidence log and so forth for collection. Do you know what's referred to, what it means when they say there's an evidence log?
Yes.
And is there an evidence log, or was there an evidence log in this particular case that you're familiar with?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of that evidence log?
That's quite important. That's a chain of custody, what we call it. So everything we collect, whether it be clothing, whether it be a hair from the body, whether it be sampling, like Ms. Linton who did a GSR, gunshot residue test, for example, sexual assault kit. Those are all separate and put in separate envelopes, and then it's ultimately taken down to a basement area, which is where our evidence control area is located. Then whatever agency may come by will have to sign out. First, it's logged in from us, and then it'll be checked out in sequential order, which agency takes it. In this case, LA Sheriff's Department, the date, the time, and whoever takes it. Then anything that may be returned back to us for whatever reason, it's logged back in again at a different date and time. But that's how we keep what's called a chain of custody, so we know where everything is going and where it's been.
Okay, and have you reviewed that in connection with this case at all?
Well, I reviewed it, yes.
Okay, and was there ever any documentation as to possible nail material that was collected in this particular case?
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you regarding Ms. Lintemuth, this is a little report or a one-page document that you reviewed prior to autopsy. Does she also have a report that she prepares as a result of her work that she might do in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the difference between this little handwritten fill in the box, check the box, and her official report that she eventually prepares in this case?
Well, this is a very detailed, as it's titled, sexual assault evidence data sheet. So it's referring to the body to cover ourselves, to rule out, of course, or rule in if there's any sexual assault that was done for this decedent. And this is a classic form that we use, a Form 81. So that's one item that she's completing. And then she'll generate a report of the overall scene and go into a description of that, how the body was found in detail. And that's what Mr. Bird's alluding to.
Okay. Well, we're on the subject of the sexual assault evidence data sheet.
Yes, it was.
Now, I'll show you what's marked this document on it and ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes, I do.
And claims that you have given here regarding the decedent Lana Clarkson, Ms. Lintemuth's 3-page report that I just showed you.
Yes.
And do you understand what Ms. Lintemuth was reporting on as far as the type of investigation she was doing based upon your years of work and experience with the coroner's office?
Yes.
And did she explain in her report anything she did as far as using some type of alternative light source to examine areas of the decedent's clothing and body while she was at the scene?
Yes.
And what did she report in that regard?
It's a UV light. She examined the decedent under a UV light.
Okay, and what is that used for? If you could explain to the jury essentially what that, if you know.
I don't know.
Okay, that's a light that has a different wavelength that is used to look for evidence, basically.
Counsel was testifying.
Sustained, he said he didn't know.
Okay. Do you know whether or not it is used for evidence collection purposes?
I do know it's used for that. Yes.
Okay. Were you ever told the result of Miss Clarkson's gunshot residue test? Was that ever reported to you?
Yes.
Okay. And who reported that to you?
Mr. Steve Dell in a written report.
Okay. Was it a left hand and right hand report?
Yes.
And was it positive? In other words, did her hands show gunshot residue?
Yes.
What does that mean as far as you as a pathologist is concerned? In other words, you got a positive for that. Does it mean somebody could have been holding a weapon when it was discharged?
There are two ways to look at that. The first one is correct. Mr. Steve Dowell, who will testify, will explain it better. It implies that it could have been a weapon at the time of the murder. It also the hands of the decedent could have been in the vicinity or environment when that weapon was discharged. Meaning, I'm just giving you examples. I don't know what happened here, but it could be here, could be here, here. It could be in the vicinity. I don't know how many feet. Someone else will explain that. So there's two important ways to look at that. Remember yesterday I was telling you about what else could it be? This is a good example for GSR studies to keep in mind. So like you said, could it be in her hands? That's why it's positive. Or could it be in the vicinity when the weapon's discharged?
And when you say vicinity, do you have a particular range, or is that something for somebody else to talk about?
That's for somebody else.
And it's certainly, the test is designed to determine whether a person could have fired a weapon. Is that correct?
Objection, calls for speculation as to why the test.
You need to lay a foundation if the witness is able to testify to it.
As far as your understanding of these GSR tests, when they're in the vicinity of the weapon, essentially somebody firing a weapon is in the vicinity. That's inclusive of that. Is that true?
Objection, that's vague.
Does the witness, do you?
Not really.
Okay.
All right,
Let me
the
rephrase it.
the
That was a
objection
bad
sustained.
question. How many self-inflicted, and let's kind of, I want to pin you down a little bit here, Dr. Pena, if I can. You talked about the number of self-inflicted gunshot wound cases that you've looked at in your career, and I want to talk about intraoral, inside the mouth. Okay? And how many was that again?
It'd be a couple hundred or maybe a little more.
Okay, that would be where the weapon was discharged in the mouth. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's overall. That includes the head area. So I don't know how many in the mouth. It'll be a lot less. I'll give you a number. I'm sorry.
Okay, and but basically, I think you may have said there was a 20 or so or something along those lines. Just I'm not sure the exact number, but basically, in virtually every self-inflicted wound case, or in any case, GSR tests are done. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And is it your experience that people that pull the trigger in a self-inflicted wound where the wound is in the mouth, inside the mouth, generally
Not always.
Okay. You're talking clearly about a person.
Not
For the times you get reports about clothing, the sleeves, for example,
That's correct.
up the arm, in other words, up near the, on the, towards the elbow.
I'm not sure about that area, but I'm sure it's possible. I'm not too good with that.
Okay, was there any report that was clothing, whether or not there was any gunshot residue in or about her clothing?
I don't recall any reports.
Okay. Was there any verbal information that was given to you, similar to the verbal information that was given to you by the sheriff's department and the criminalists regarding blood spatter and things of that nature?
There was none.
Okay. Now, with reference to Ms. Lintemuth, to finish up on her, where we started this brief inquiry regarding the gunshot residue, because she collected it correctly, GSR?
Yes.
And did she also reference in her report regarding the chipped or broken thumbnail that particular nail was removed or excised by yourself and Miss Nelson?
That's correct.
Okay, and tell the jury what you mean by that.
What we did is carefully took Miss Clarkson's hand with the help of Barb Nelson present. And we have nail removers. I don't know much about this stuff. But
Okay, let me ask you this. In the previous form from Ms. Lintemuth, she talked about damaged nail kit. So you have kind of a prepackaged thing that you use to collect this. Is that correct?
that's correct.
So it must be done often enough to require that a kit is actually developed so that it can be easier done in a particular case. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so if you could first explain to the jury what this damaged nail kit is, to your understanding, and what you and Miss Nelson did with that damaged nail kit.
To be honest with you, I haven't dealt too much with that damaged nail kit. I cannot tell you what it contains. So I will skip that, and I'll go to the nail. I was given a special instrument by Barb Nelson. She wanted me to do it. And I worked my way around the nail basically and removed completely that whole right nail, keeping it intact, which it was. We carefully lifted it off. She helped me get it onto the brown paper, which is, of course, clean. I don't know how they come in. They're folded. You have to unfold the brown paper, put the nail in there, refold it carefully. Then after it's folded in there, put it into another envelope, which has the labeling for it. So you put the case number down, the decedent's name, the time that you collected. Then you put a seal around that, and I initial it, date it, and time, and then it's put in a special bindle. And that's what we do.
Okay. And what was the reason that you do this extra procedure with reference to this particular nail with this damaged nail kit? What was that you take out the whole nail?
Because I wanted to rule out a couple of things. Mainly to see if there's any gunpowder or residue on the residual nail. That was going through my head at the scene, and when the body came back, I wanted to protect that nail. And I wanted to rule that out or rule it in, if possible.
Okay, so how was that done?
That was sent to the LA Sheriff Crime Lab for analysis.
Okay, and would that, if it was present, would that indicate that somebody could have fired a gun with that nail?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, could it indicate that it was near the end of a gun when it was fired?
That I don't know.
Okay, so that was ruled out. There was nothing specific found on that nail, or was there?
There was nothing that was relayed to me, and I saw in a report also there was nothing of significance on that nail.
Okay.
There might have been some blood, but I'm not sure what that means.
There would be blood from the excise process.
That's what I think, yes.
Oh, okay, so it all came back to Lana Clarkson essentially?
I believe so, yes.
And essentially you were looking for maybe evidence of a struggle, foreign material on it, and that came back negative also.
That's correct.
Now, in Ms. Lintemuth's report in particular, on page 2, did she talk about, you talked about blood flow and things of that nature that occurred after?
And in actuality, she could have broken that nail when she came in the house. She could have bumped it against a piece of furniture. It doesn't matter. I don't know why they're spending so much time on the damn fingernail. I really don't. I know they're trying to say it's going to indicate whether she did it to herself or he did it, but I really think the nail is a nothing burger. I think they're going too far in depth into this stupid fingernail issue. Asking about the brand of the acrylic nail is ridiculous. What are they going to do? Are they going to go to every nail salon in LA County and try to figure out where she got her nails done and how sturdy they are and would they crack? It's ridiculous at this point. Good Lord.
After Ms. Clarkson died, did she document that in her report?
Yes.
Did she talk about there being no blood flow observed due to the transport of the decedent, that basically they compared it before she left when she got there and there was no blood flow?
Correct.
Did she also talk about the decedent having this purge and that it basically got on a certain portion of her garment?
Yes.
And how did they remove her jacket, at the coroner's office once they got her there?
I remember it was cut down, like it says there, the center of the backside. So you can imagine Miss Clarkson on her left side, like I'm trying to do here. She has the jacket on, like my jacket, and it's cut right down the center, up all the way up.
Okay, was it Ms. Lintemuth's job to note the areas of contamination and things that occurred to the garment during the transport process?
Yes.
And did she indicate only that the what you call the purge occurred on the shoulder of the jacket?
That's correct.
Okay, she didn't say anything about it going down the sleeve, going on the buttons, or anything such as that?
No, she just says the left side of the decedent's jacket was resting in a fresh pool of blood.
Excuse me?
She just says, let it be noted that the left side of the decedent's jacket was resting in a fresh pool of blood.
Okay, and where is she making that observation at?
At the coroner's office.
Okay, and did that mean that the blood came out after it got to the coroner's office? Because it
No.
didn't happen during transport?
It didn't happen during transport. It happened when we turned her on her left side, and then the purge came out, and it came down. I think it was from the shoulder, if I remember correctly, down the left side of the arm. And she has buttons on it, and it included all those areas.
Okay, now you keep mentioning the buttons having something on it. Is it your testimony that there was nothing on the buttons at the scene?
From what I can remember, yes.
Okay, what did you document in your notes regarding the buttons at the scene?
I did not.
Did you see any blood on the buttons?
No,
Blood stains or anything like that?
no.
Did you see any material? When somebody gets shot in the mouth, do you ever see material other than just blood come out? In other words, particles of other, like tissue and things of that nature?
I mean, other than blood?
Correct.
Well, it'd be with blood. I've seen, you gotta have a combination, because I've never seen anything without blood. If someone puts a gun to the head, because the head is hard, has to be to the head, you're gonna see blood come out with the direction that, I'm sorry, where the weapon was placed, and blood tissue I've seen come out. It'll come out in gobs, actually, and basically those are two materials that I've seen. Of course, bone I've seen come out.
Okay. But with the mouth in particular, the interoral, inside the mouth wounds, other material besides
I've only
blood?
seen blood, to be honest with you. I've never seen like the spinal cord tissue come out or bone, maybe a little bit, but I can't recall.
Okay, but that's not something that you particularly have any expertise in, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, and would you feel comfortable in rendering an opinion as to whether something came out immediately after a gun was fired inside the mouth, and rendering an opinion as to how that happened?
No.
Okay. What type of an expert would be the type of person that would be able to give such an opinion, if you know?
I'd be a blood spatter person from the crime lab.
Okay. Would a pathologist that was familiar with blood spatter and tissue blowback be qualified to do that if they were familiar with that subject, person with your credentials and qualifications?
I don't know, and I don't know of any offhand that can do that, to be honest with you, in our line of work.
Okay.
It's very focused.
Oh, okay.
Would like to have this, the people have a transparency of the same exhibit. It's 2743, is one number, but we haven't had it marked as
WW.
WW. $651. Dr. Pim, okay, and does it have some notes on here, front to back, slightly upward, your handwriting?
Yes,
Is this part of your coroner's file record?
yes,
And has Lana Clarkson's case number and so forth, and it's actually signed by you at the bottom right-hand corner?
that's correct.
And that's typical for your work, is you sign these diagrams so that you can then authenticate them later on and say that these are the ones that you prepared. Is that true?
Yes,
Now, this is one called a Form 22, is that correct?
yes,
And basically, it has a generic figure of a person that's not meant to represent the features of Lana Clarkson, but just a general view of a human being, correct?
yes,
Okay, and this particular one was not done at the time of autopsy, was it?
no.
And was this done because there was some particular request made of you regarding a particular proceeding?
Yes,
Okay, and if you could tell the jury how that came about.
sure. Back in,
Yes, that looks just like Lana Clarkson. The whole jury thought that was Lana Clarkson before you pointed that out. Thank you for letting them know that that is not an actual representation of Lana Clarkson.
sometime prior to, well, August 27, 2004, I was contacted by the DA handling the case at that time, Mr. Doug Sortino. He had asked me and called me, I remember, if I could draw him a diagram the best I could, indicate the direction of fire through the tissue as an illustration for the grand jury hearing. And that's how this diagram came about.
Okay, and so this was sort of a special request so that he could visually show something that you would create to show the path of the bullet. Is that true?
Through the tissue, correct.
Through the tissue. And okay, define what you mean by that when you use that
Okay.
term.
As a medical examiner, when I gave you yesterday, we went through direction of fire, as Mr. Flores alluded to, also front to back and slightly upward. What I'm talking about is when that weapon, the bullet comes out, it strikes the tongue, et cetera, goes to the back of the tissue. I'm referring to that moment in time when it strikes that first tissue onward. And that's the direction it's taking for me as a medical examiner. So again, front to back, we know it's going, and slightly upward.
Okay, and this would be, these arrows would be that direction, is that correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Jackson talked a lot about possibilities of deviation, where the bullet might deviate once it hits a harder object, which you said sometimes occurs and sometimes doesn't occur, is that correct?
That's right.
And you don't know whether it occurred or didn't occur in this case, is that true?
That's correct.
But regardless of whether it occurred or didn't occur, the direction of the bullet before it struck bone was what this exhibit shows, Exhibit WW. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And in order to make the determination, you don't just kind of eyeball it, you actually take measurements. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things you must measure from a starting point so that you have a point of reference. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And what was your point of reference in this particular case?
The top of the head.
Okay, and so you look at the sort of the entry wound inside the body, and you figure out a way to measure that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you have instruments to do that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so you looked at the top of the head, and you looked at the entry wound, and then you also look at other areas where the bullet went through, and you measure those as you go along towards the bullet path. Correct?
Well, I don't measure each individual point. I measure ultimately where that bullet ends up, and I kind of put the beginning point and the end point together to see if there's any deviation upward, downward, of course, or right to left or left to right.
Okay, and there was no deviation.
And no, not from what I saw.
Okay, so you didn't see the bullet go and move left or right. It was going straight, first of all, as far as that plane. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you didn't see it deviating from the path either up or down. Is that correct?
Well, no, it went slightly upward.
Well, I mean, you didn't see it deviate from the upward trajectory.
I don't
upward path.
quite understand what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Okay, maybe I'm that very unclear question. I apologize. First of all, this is a side view, and basically it shows the upward direction of the bullet path within the body. Is that correct?
Yes.
And not taking into consideration whether the head was up or down, it just simply shows the path in an upward direction, assuming the person is at an anatomically correct standing upright position, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you measured the back of the head, is that correct, from the top? Is that true?
I did that.
And you measured the entry wound somewhere in the back of the throat, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and when you basically just did a line of sight and it was a straight line essentially, is that correct, with an upward trajectory?
Yes.
Okay, and you didn't see it deviate left or right, is that true?
Yes.
And you didn't see it, assuming the upward trajectory, it wasn't a little higher or a little lower than this angle that you draw here. It kept going after it hit.
I'm sorry.
Okay, let me ask
Try
you
that again.
complicated question, so we're going to kind of break it down. You looked at basically the angle when it was shot inside the mouth, is that correct, to the point where it actually struck tissue?
Correct.
Okay, let's break that down. What tissue are you talking about that you were measuring from?
The tissue in the throat.
Okay, front of the throat, back of the throat, side of the throat?
In the throat, in the center portion.
Okay, if you look at somebody, if I'm looking at the judge straight and he happened to have his mouth open, I'd be looking at the back of his throat. When he yells at me, that's what I see.
Right.
And is that where you were measuring from, the back of the throat?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, and you were looking at the entrance wound, is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and the entrance wound was in the back of the throat. If you'd open up the mouth, you'd see the back of the throat, and that was the entrance wound where the bullet struck.
Correct.
Okay. Same, Mr. Carroll, the gunshot person, he calls that the target. Is that what he's referring to as the target?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's what you measured in this particular diagram, WW.
Yes, from the top, for the jurors, from the top of the head, I have a ruler. I put it down to the mouth, and that's what I get, in this case, 7 inches, just for your information. And the one to the back of the head, which we talked about yesterday, I didn't give you this information, it's okay. But from the top of the head, where I get the bullet, that's where it ended, it's about 5.5 inches.
Okay, and so we've got the starting point and they've got the ending point. You measured both.
Yes.
And you documented in your autopsy records on the day that you did the autopsy, the results of those measurements. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and were you able to see the difference between the two?
Yes.
Okay, and that's where you get the upward trajectory. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's just go through this academically, math not being my strong suit. What was the measurement for the target or entry wound?
Well, again, I measured 7 inches from the top of the head to here. If you look at my fingers,
Okay,
as I'm showing you, this is on Miss Clarkson, not me. We're all about the same in general. And then the back of the head, I'll put my finger here. I'll turn around for the jurors and counsel again.
okay.
Back here, about here, is 5.5 inches. Just jump out.
So a 1.5 inch difference between the two, if you consider the starting point at the top of the head. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and again, I'm not good at geometry or math or anything like that, but basically what you found was from the entry wound or the target area where the bullet went in to the point where it hit the back of the skull and actually caused a protrusion. In other words, you know it hit there because it actually dented the skull outward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it didn't break the skin and no gases were released from the exit wound. Would that be true?
Well, yes, well, the gases would have been dispersed along that track as it's going forward. You have to keep that in mind.
Right.
So that's important to understand. I've never heard of gases coming out of an exit wound, but that's just me for my simple mind.
Okay.
Anyway.
But anyway, there wasn't an exit wound, so we know they didn't come out if they could come out. In other
Right.
words.
Well, they got dispersed.
Okay, but anyway, the bullet went up 1.5 inches, and what was the distance between this target, the entry wound, and this point where the bullet came to rest? Was it just a matter of a few inches?
I didn't measure it, to be honest with you.
Less than 6, I would suppose.
Oh, yeah.
Much less than 6,
Yeah.
correct? So it actually had a trajectory that this actually underestimates it, does it not? I mean, this diagram?
Oh, yes.
Okay, in other words, it was going at a much higher angle. In other words, if we looked at this in scale, it would be a big difference. In other words, the angle was sharply upward. Is that true?
Whoa, hold on a second. I don't quite understand your question.
Well, let me
there.
rephrase that. Essentially, it went up 1.5 inches from the point it entered. We're not talking about the beginning of the mouth. You're just using these arrows to give an example to illustrate this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but it went up 1.5 inches from the back of the throat to the point where the bullet rested, and no evidence that the bullet deviated its path from the time it entered to the time it hit the back of the skull. Is that correct?
I'm looking to object, Your Honor, that misstates the testimony.
In what way?
The 1.5 inches is from the mouth,
No.
7 inches from the top of the head, to the 5.5 inches to the back of the head.
Right. Sustained, you may rephrase.
Let me ask you this question. The point you measured was the entry wound, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the entry wound was the back of the throat,
Correct.
okay, not the mouth, not the lips. The entry wound was the back of the throat,
Correct.
and the point of rest where the bullet hit the back of the skull was what do you call that location?
You can just simply say ending point or where a bullet is obtained.
Okay, ending point. You measured that from the top of the skull, and it was basically 5.5 inches. Is that correct?
That's right.
So the difference between the two, and the back of the throat would have been somewhere right where I'm pointing now, somewhere in there. Or where would it be? If you could.
That's okay. You're fine.
Use the ear for kind of a point of reference.
That's good. Yeah.
Like the lobe of the ear.
Maybe a little bit in front. There you go.
Right about there. Okay.
That's fine.
And it went up 1.5 inches to this point here, which is the ending point.
Yes.
Okay. And the fact that you put arrows in the mouth and so forth, that just would indicate basically the angle of the gun should be the same as the path of the bullet. Is that correct?
That I don't know. What do
Okay.
you mean by angle of gun?
In other words, if you had a gun that was tilted this way, the bullet wouldn't be going in a different direction, would it?
Yeah, that's tough for a medical examiner to figure out. I'm sorry, reconstruction or crime person, our laboratory gunfire person can answer that better than I can.
Okay, well, maybe set aside your medical examiner and your forensic pathology experience and just talk about common sense. A gun is pointed in a direction, the bullet usually goes in the direction that the gun is pointed. Just a common sense.
Well, as long as something isn't in the way.
Okay, assuming that, correct?
Right.
All right. And basically the bullet didn't go upward, went upwards within the body, but it didn't deviate from left to right. It was essentially straight into the mouth. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you also know that looking at this object here, that I'm going to put it in my mouth for a second and try to approximate the direction. It was essentially, it didn't go left to right either. It was pretty much straight through, center.
Correct.
If we looked at let's take a look at another portion of this particular document. And we look at this particular figure here. If we could have that highlighted for a moment, and if we could have the hard copy of Exhibit WW for a second.
I wonder if anybody got sick for this child. If he put his stuff in the mouth.
Okay.
Germs. Ugh.
On the top, you weren't asked to do this by the DA at the time before your grand jury testimony, Dr. Pena, but if you look at this particular portion of Exhibit WW, look at this, basically the way that the path would be in the mouth and basically right down the center. In other words, if you look from left to right, it wasn't on the left side of her mouth or the right side of her mouth. It was basically in the center of her mouth, basically is where you saw the entry wound and as it transected through the body. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's take a minute. We've got the original copy of Exhibit WW. And what I'd like you to do is just like you did with the side view, if you could, maybe with a red pin, I'll get you one here. Could you kind of do some arrows to show that it's basically center using the mouth and show where the, as far as the angle as it went in, as it didn't deviate left or right.
I'll put broken arrows.
Okay, and if we could get the Elmo here when we're done and do a quick switch right before the noon recess.
Okay.
Have you had a chance to do that, Doctor?
Yes.
Okay, and
I have little dots there. I put an R and an L for right to left, right and left side.
okay. Hopefully we can see this on the see this on the Elmo at this point. And for the record, we're showing Exhibit WW. And essentially what you're showing the jury is a different view as far as the left to right position of the bullet as it goes through. And we're not saying that it went up higher. We're just talking about the angle it went in. Is that in the position it went in? Is that true?
Yes.
And does this WW accurately reflect in this particular portion of the diagram, this top left-hand schematic, does it show that it was basically dead center within the mouth?
Well, pretty much, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
you didn't measure it to the millimeter, but
No.
in general, it wasn't like, but it was consistent, was it not, with somebody holding the weapon and pointing it in an upward trajectory? Is that correct? In other words, holding it straight, holding it within the mouth, putting the barrel and resting the barrel on the teeth and the tongue and firing the weapon. Is that true?
Also speculation. Depends on where the head was.
Are you able to answer?
That medical evidence.
Well, we walked through the whole case, and I don't want to dive back into that. I explain my reasons. I'm trying to say I don't want to get. I'm kind of confused at what you're asking first.
Okay, well, maybe I'll re-ask the question. Try to make it.
You can do that. You can ponder it. 1:30, ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition. We'll see you at 1:30 this afternoon.
All right, StreamYard. You've been good all day. Make me big. Come on. Don't get glitchy now. We're done. Just make me big. Okay. All right, I'll give you this one, StreamYard. Okay, bye, guys. I gotta go to the doctor just to check up. I'm okay. So I will see you back by then. And try to get caught up with the live, but that's good. We can fast forward through sidebars and all that good stuff. So I will see you later. Bye, guys. Love y'all. Oh, now I'm big. Okay. Bye. Okay, end the stream, StreamYard. End it. You can go ahead and end it now. We're done. You can go back to sleep, StreamYard. Any day now. Come on, StreamYard. No, that won't end the stream.